Before we begin, this broadcast is a fictional audio drama created for entertainment purposes. Good evening, you're listening to Fictional Radio. I'm John Vale. We're beginning with a developing emergency that started as a regional power failure and has now become a multi-state infrastructure crisis. Officials are still urging calm, and that word has appeared in almost every statement we have received in the last hour, but the response on the ground is expanding faster than the explanations. At this moment, large sections of the northeastern United States are without power. That includes parts of New York, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Vermont. We are also getting confirmed reports of outages in Ontario and Quebec, though Canadian officials have not yet said whether those failures are directly connected to what is happening on the American side of the border. The first public explanation was a transmission fault. That language came from state emergency management officials shortly after several major utility operators reported what they called an instability event along a high-voltage corridor west of Albany. Within 30 minutes, that explanation had changed. We were told it may involve multiple substations, then a possible software failure, and now federal agencies are involved. The Department of Energy has activated its emergency response team. Homeland Security is coordinating with state authorities. Several governors have issued emergency orders allowing fuel and medical supplies to move without normal restrictions. I want to be careful with the way we describe this because in the first hour of any large emergency, wrong information moves faster than good information. What we can say is that this is not a normal outage. It is not limited to one city, one utility, or one weather event. There are no active storm systems severe enough to explain the scale. There has been no major earthquake. No confirmed cyber attack has been announced, and yet the blackout is widening.
John, the images coming in are already difficult to process because so many of them look familiar at first. People walking down subway tracks with flashlights, apartment towers completely dark except for cell phone screens and windows, police officers standing in intersections with flares, hospital entrances lit by generator lamps while the streets around them are black. It looks, in pieces, like outages we have seen before, but the pieces are too spread out. We have verified footage from Manhattan showing a line of people leaving a stalled train near Times Square, guided by transit workers using handheld lamps. In Newark, passengers at the airport are sitting on the floor near dark departure boards, and airline staff are writing gate changes by hand on paper signs. Boston Logan has suspended all departures, not because the runways are physically unusable, but because backup systems are being reserved for emergency operations and safe deplaning. In parts of Philadelphia, traffic has locked up around intersections where signals failed all at once, and police are asking people not to call 911 unless there is immediate danger. The thing that keeps coming up in local reports is confusion. Not panic everywhere, not chaos in the way people imagine it, but confusion. People are looking at dead phones, dead elevators, dark stores, silent gas pumps, and they are trying to understand whether this will last 20 minutes, 2 hours, or the rest of the night. Officials do not have that answer yet.
And that uncertainty matters because infrastructure failures do not stay in one category for long. A power outage quickly becomes a communications problem, then a transportation problem, then a medical problem, then a water pressure problem, then a public safety problem. Emergency managers plan for that chain, but they plan with assumptions, and some of those assumptions are already being tested tonight. We are now about 2 hours from the first confirmed outage reports in upstate New York. Since then, the blackout has moved through areas that are normally connected by the grid, but also into areas that should not have failed so quickly. Utility operators are not using the phrase cascading failure in their most recent statements. That is worth noting. Earlier tonight, that was the phrase appearing in local briefings. A cascading failure means one part of the system fails, stress shifts to another, that part fails, and so on. It can be devastating, but it has a logic. It follows load, transmission, protection systems, geography, and physics. What we are hearing now is that the failures are not lining up neatly with that model. That does not mean something supernatural is happening. It does not mean the laws of physics have changed. It means the first model officials reached for may not explain everything they are seeing. Several hospitals in the affected region are operating on backup power. New York Presbyterian has moved some non-critical patients away from upper floors where elevators are unreliable. Massachusetts General says its emergency generators are functioning and that critical systems remain online. In Albany, 2 hospitals briefly lost generator support for less than a minute before secondary systems took over. We do not have reports of mass casualties. We do have reports of patients being moved manually through stairwells in at least 3 facilities. Those details are not dramatic additions. They are what happens when power, elevators, communications, and staffing all become problems at once. State officials are asking people in affected areas to stay where they are if they are safe. Do not crowd roads unless you have been ordered to evacuate. Do not drive toward hospitals unless you require emergency care. Keep phone use limited when possible. If you have battery-powered radios, keep them on. If you have neighbors who are elderly or medically vulnerable, check on them safely if you can.
We are also seeing emergency shelters open in places that still have partial power. In western Massachusetts, schools with generator access are being used as warming and medical support centers, even though this is not winter and temperatures are not the main threat tonight. The concern is people who rely on powered medical devices, people trapped in apartment buildings without working elevators, and families who were caught outside when streetlights and transit systems failed. A caller to one of our affiliate stations in northern New Jersey described walking out of a grocery store just after the lights went down. She said the registers stopped, the doors opened automatically once, then stayed open, and people just stood there for a few seconds waiting for the lights to come back. No one screamed, no one ran. Then every phone in the store started lighting up as people tried to call home at the same time, and within minutes, service slowed almost to nothing. That is the kind of detail we are hearing repeatedly tonight. Ordinary places turning strange because the basic things stop answering. A parking garage where the gate arms will not lift. A train platform where the arrival signs are blank but people keep looking at them anyway. A restaurant kitchen going dark in the middle of dinner service. The staff carrying food out by flashlight because the customers are still sitting there unsure whether to leave. And John, I want to add this carefully. We have several accounts from different cities describing lights flickering after the outage, not before. Normally you see flickering as the system struggles and then fails. People are saying entire buildings went dark, stayed dark, and then minutes later a few upper floors blinked on briefly before going out again. That may be backup systems. It may be isolated circuits. It may be people misreading what they saw in a stressful moment. But the reports are similar enough that local officials are asking residents not to assume power has been restored until utilities confirm it.
That is important. Brief light does not necessarily mean restoration. In several affected cities, emergency services are warning people not to restart heavy appliances, elevators, industrial equipment, or medical systems without proper clearance. A sudden, uncontrolled return of power can be dangerous. It can start fires, damage equipment, overload circuits, and injure people who are working on the system. We have just received an updated statement from the regional grid coordinator. I am going to paraphrase this rather than read the whole thing, because most of it is technical and some of it is still unclear. They say grid operators observed what they are calling an irregular load rejection across several transmission zones. In plain terms, power was being generated, but portions of the grid stopped accepting it in the expected way. Protective systems opened automatically to prevent damage. Operators then attempted staged restoration, but the same irregular behavior appeared in areas that had not been directly affected by the first outage. That is not a normal press statement. It is careful, but it is not reassuring. When a grid operator says power is being generated but not accepted properly, that suggests a serious mismatch between production, transmission, and demand. The system is supposed to balance those things constantly. When it cannot, equipment trips offline to protect itself. What we do not know is why that imbalance began or why it is spreading. We are also hearing that several natural gas plants in Pennsylvania and New York were ordered to reduce output, not because fuel was unavailable, but because grid conditions made continued generation unsafe. Nuclear plants in the affected region remain secure, according to federal regulators, with automatic safeguards operating normally. Again, there is no indication of a nuclear emergency. But some plants are disconnecting from the grid as a precaution. That means less available power for restoration, and it means the path back is not as simple as flipping switches.
Air travel across the region is becoming one of the clearest public signs of how serious this is. The FAA has ordered ground stops at several airports, and delays are spreading beyond the blackout zone because aircraft and crews are now out of position. In Toronto, passengers are being held in terminals while officials assess whether Canadian outages are connected. Montreal's Emergency Operations Center is active. Amtrak service along parts of the Northeast Corridor has been suspended, and transit agencies are asking people not to enter stations unless they are following evacuation instructions from workers on site. There is a particular video from inside a train tunnel in New York that has been shared widely in the last 20 minutes. We have not aired the audio because there are frightened people in it and some identifying details, but what it shows is a line of passengers walking between rails, using phone lights, with a transit employee at the front calling back instructions. The tunnel itself is dark except for small emergency lamps. You can hear water dripping somewhere. Someone asks whether there is another train coming, and the worker says no, power is down, nothing is moving. The strange thing is how calm most people are. They are scared, obviously, but they are moving together. That is worth remembering tonight. Most people in emergencies do not become the worst version of themselves. They help the person next to them. They hold doors. They share batteries. They carry strollers upstairs. We are seeing that too, even as the situation gets worse.
Yes, and while we are going to follow the frightening parts of this story because those are real, we should be accurate about what is happening on the ground. Emergency crews are working. Hospitals are still functioning. Police and fire departments are deploying. Utility workers are at substations, control centers, and power plants right now, and many of them are dealing with conditions that are difficult to explain to the public because they are still trying to explain them to themselves. We are receiving questions from listeners outside the affected areas asking whether they should prepare for outages. The honest answer is yes, but not in a panicked way. Charge devices while you can, locate flashlights, avoid unnecessary travel, keep fuel in your vehicle if you are already near a station and it is safe to do so, have water available, check official local sources. Do not spread screenshots or claims that are not verified. This is a large emergency, and bad information will make it harder. Now we have new reports from the Midwest that we are working to confirm. Utilities in Ohio and Michigan are reporting instability warnings. That does not mean those states are going dark. It means grid operators are seeing stress or unusual behavior and are preparing for possible disconnection. There are scattered outages near Cleveland and Toledo, though severe weather earlier today may complicate that picture. We are not yet connecting those outages to the larger blackout. We are watching them.
John, we have one more piece coming from emergency management channels in Pennsylvania. Again, this is not a public evacuation order, but county officials in parts of the state are being told to prepare for what they are calling prolonged restoration. That phrase matters. A short outage is handled one way, a prolonged outage changes priorities completely. Fuel distribution, water systems, pharmacy access, backup power for cell towers, shelters, nursing homes, dialysis centers, traffic control, refrigeration. All of that moves higher on the list. We've also heard from several local stations that cell service is beginning to fail unevenly. Some towers have battery backup, some have generators, some are overloaded because everyone is trying to connect at once. So people in affected areas may be receiving alerts late or not at all. That is why officials are asking anyone with working radio reception to keep listening and share confirmed information with neighbors, especially people who may not have phones working anymore. One station outside Scranton reported that their studio lights came back briefly while the rest of the building stayed dark. The hosts thought the generator had started, but their engineer told them the generator was still offline. The lights stayed on for about 12 seconds. Then the emergency alert printer activated, printed a blank sheet, and shut down. They are not claiming anything beyond that. It could be a wiring issue, it could be residual power, it could be a malfunction caused by the outage, but it is another one of those details that does not sit neatly inside the official explanation.
We should be careful with that. Electrical systems can behave strangely during failures. Capacitors hold charge. Backup systems misfire. Automated equipment can restart out of sequence. A blank alert printout is not evidence of anything larger by itself. But yes, the number of strange little events is growing. The White House has now issued a statement. The president has been briefed by the Department of Energy, Homeland Security, FEMA, and the governors of affected states. Federal support is being deployed. The public is being asked to follow local emergency instructions and conserve communications bandwidth. There is no confirmed hostile action at this time. That phrase, "at this time," is doing a lot of work. It means they have not ruled it out. It also means they have not confirmed it. The Canadian government has activated emergency coordination with U.S. officials. Ontario's grid operator says outages in the province are under investigation and may involve protective disconnections related to instability south of the border. Quebec's situation is less clear. Hydro-Quebec has reported several transmission interruptions, but not a province-wide failure. Montreal has partial power in most districts, though several neighborhoods are reporting flickering and outages. We are going to widen the map now. We began with a northeastern blackout. We are now looking at grid disturbances from eastern Canada through the mid-Atlantic and into the Great Lakes region. That does not mean all of those places are dark. It means the emergency is no longer local.
And for people living through it, the scale may not be obvious from where they are. If you are in a dark apartment in Hartford or a stalled train outside Newark, you may not know that someone in Ottawa is watching the same kind of flicker. If you are in a hospital hallway in Albany, you may not know that grid operators in Ohio are seeing warnings. Emergencies feel local until the map catches up. We are also getting more reports of what people are calling delayed light. That is not an official term. It is just how residents are describing it. Power goes out completely, and then, after a gap, a few lights return briefly in places that should not have independent power. One apartment building in Queens reportedly had hallway lights come on one floor at a time, starting at the top and moving down. A building manager told a local station that the emergency lighting system should not work that way. Again, not confirmed by officials, but the station says they spoke to multiple residents in the same building who described the same sequence. In Providence, a hotel lost power, switched to generator, then lost generator power. Staff began moving guests down stairwells. Several minutes later, lights came on in the ballroom only, even though the ballroom was not being used and the rest of the hotel stayed dark. The lights shut off when staff opened the ballroom doors. I know how that sounds. It sounds like a ghost story, and that is not how we report it. But in a night full of technical failure, people are going to describe what they saw in human terms. Our job is to separate the description from the interpretation.
Exactly. And to be clear for everyone listening, we are not suggesting a supernatural explanation. We are reporting unusual behavior during a major infrastructure failure. The simplest explanation may still be complex grid instability, combined with stressed backup systems, overloaded communications, and human perception under pressure. But we have another update now from the Department of Energy. This came in just seconds ago. Federal officials are asking utilities across the Eastern Interconnection to suspend non-essential restoration attempts until a coordinated assessment is complete. That is significant. Restoration is normally the goal. If officials are asking utilities to pause some restoration efforts, it means they are concerned that attempts to bring power back may be worsening the instability. Let me say that again plainly. Some utilities are being told not to rush power back. That will be frightening for people sitting in darkness. It may also be necessary if uncontrolled restoration could damage equipment or expand the outage. We do not know which systems are included in that request. Critical services will remain priority. Hospitals, emergency operations centers, water systems, and communications infrastructure are still receiving support where possible, but broad neighborhood restoration may be delayed.
That delay is going to be hard on people because darkness changes the way a city feels very quickly. We have traffic cameras from the few intersections still operating on backup power, and in the surrounding blocks you can see the city without its usual shape. No office towers glowing. No storefront signs. No moving lines of headlights in certain corridors because traffic has frozen. Just occasional red and blue emergency lights moving through streets that are otherwise black. In Jersey City, residents on upper floors are using flashlights to signal down to people in the street. In Boston, a group of restaurant workers reportedly carried food from a walk-in refrigerator to people waiting outside because they were worried it would spoil if the outage lasted. In parts of Brooklyn, people have dragged chairs onto sidewalks, not because it is safe or festive, but because apartments are hot, elevators are out, and no one wants to sit alone inside a dark building. There is fear, but there is also this strange quiet. Multiple reporters have mentioned it. A major city without its electrical hum sounds wrong. You hear voices from farther away than usual. You hear sirens without the background noise. You hear generators where they work, as if each one is its own little island.
We are now entering the third hour of this emergency. The blackout remains concentrated in the Northeast, but instability has spread into the Great Lakes and parts of eastern Canada. Federal officials are coordinating response. Restoration attempts are being slowed or paused in some areas. Major airports are under ground stops. Rail service is disrupted. Hospitals are operating under emergency protocols. There are no confirmed mass casualty events, no confirmed hostile attack, and no confirmed explanation for why the outage is spreading outside expected patterns. We are going to stay with this live. If you are listening from an affected area on battery power, conserve what you have. If you are safe, stay in place. If you need emergency help and phones are not working, many municipalities are setting up physical emergency points at fire stations, police precincts, schools, and municipal buildings. That information varies by location, so follow local instructions if you can receive them. We have just received word from Ohio. Cleveland Public Power is reporting widespread outages in the city and surrounding suburbs. Toledo is reporting partial failure. Detroit's grid is unstable but not fully down. The governor of Ohio is preparing an emergency declaration. We do not yet know whether this is the same event, but the timing is concerning.
And John, there is something else from Cleveland. Local reporters are describing a brief citywide flicker just before the larger outage. Not unusual by itself, but several people say that after the power went out, the lights in certain downtown buildings came back on in vertical strips. Not floors, not rooms, strips. Like columns of windows turning white for a few seconds against an otherwise dark skyline. A photographer for a local paper captured part of it from across the river. The image is blurry because it was taken in low light, but you can see 3 tall buildings dark around the edges with narrow bands of lit windows running from lower floors to upper floors. The power company has not commented on that image. It may have a completely ordinary explanation, but it matches some of what we've heard from New York and Providence. Power returning briefly in patterns that do not match normal circuits.
We are going to treat that as an unconfirmed visual report until utility officials respond, but yes, it is part of the pattern we are watching. I also want to address something listeners may be seeing online. There are claims that the blackout is being caused by a solar flare. At this time, NOAA's Space Weather Prediction Center has not reported a geomagnetic storm strong enough to explain this event. Solar weather can affect power grids. It has before. But the available public data does not support that as the primary explanation right now. That could change if new information comes in, but we should not fill uncertainty with whatever explanation sounds biggest. There are also claims of coordinated attacks, foreign involvement, experimental weapons, and secret military exercises. None of that is confirmed. Law enforcement agencies are monitoring critical infrastructure. That is standard during an event of this scale. Military units may be seen moving generators, fuel, medical support, and communications equipment. That does not by itself indicate war or attack. What is confirmed is serious enough. The lights are out across major parts of North America. The failure is spreading unevenly. Restoration is not working as expected. And officials are now asking some utilities to stop trying to bring the grid back until they understand what is happening.
For those just joining us, we want to give the human picture again, because the map can become abstract. If you are outside the affected area, you may hear grid instability and think of lines on a chart. But tonight, that means a nurse holding a flashlight over a patient while equipment is moved to a working outlet. It means someone stuck on the 18th floor of a building where the elevator stopped between floors. It means a father walking 6 miles because the train stopped and his phone died before he could tell his family where he was. It means dispatchers writing emergency calls by hand because computer-aided systems are intermittent. It also means people are adapting. In New Haven, a local radio station moved to a backup transmitter and is reading shelter locations every few minutes. In Buffalo, where power is still mostly stable, volunteers are preparing supplies in case outages move west. In Montreal, buses are being staged near hospitals. In small towns across Pennsylvania, fire stations have opened their doors so people can charge medical devices from generator power. The fear tonight is real, but so is the response.
We are going to take a brief station identification in a moment, but we will not leave the story. When we come back, we will go through the latest state-by-state picture and what officials are saying about the possibility of a coordinated restoration plan overnight. Before that, one new development. We have received multiple reports from emergency managers in New York and Pennsylvania that some backup generators are failing after successful startup. Not all, not even most as far as we know, but enough that state officials are asking facilities to test secondary systems now rather than assume primary generators will hold. Fuel supply is not the issue in the initial reports. In several cases, the generator starts, carries load, then shuts down without obvious mechanical failure. Engineers are investigating whether grid isolation systems are interfering with generator output. That is technical language, but the practical meaning is simple. Backup power is not guaranteed everywhere tonight. If you are relying on powered medical equipment, contact local emergency services if you can, or go to the nearest designated emergency site if travel is safe. If you have neighbors who may be relying on such equipment, check on them. Do it carefully. Bring a flashlight. Avoid elevators. Do not enter flooded or damaged areas. And please, do not use grills, camp stoves, or gasoline generators indoors. Carbon monoxide becomes a major danger during blackouts, and emergency rooms do not need another crisis layered on top of this one.
We're also hearing from families who are separated. People were at work when this began. Students were on campuses. Parents were commuting. Transit is not reliable. Phones are fading. If you are able to send one message, make it simple. Where you are, whether you are safe, whether you are staying there or moving. Do not waste battery trying to refresh every feed. Information will come in pieces tonight. And John, before the break, I want to mention one image from Brooklyn because it captures where we are. A camera on a rooftop shows the skyline almost completely dark. In the foreground, someone has placed a battery lantern on the ledge, and below, you can see people in the street moving slowly with flashlights. Farther away, in Manhattan, a few towers are still lit on emergency power. Then, for just a second, one dark building flashes white from bottom to top, like a match being struck inside the glass. The light disappears before the camera can adjust. The person filming does not say anything at first. Then you hear someone off camera ask, very quietly, "Was that supposed to happen?" That is the question tonight.
Was that supposed to happen? We do not know yet. You're listening to Fictional Radio. I'm John Vale with Mara Ellison. We are covering the developing North American blackout, now affecting multiple states and parts of eastern Canada. Stay with us. The official picture at this hour is still incomplete. New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, and parts of Vermont remain under emergency conditions. Ohio is now reporting widespread outages in the Cleveland area, with partial outages around Toledo, and grid instability across several northern counties. Michigan officials say they are monitoring severe stress on transmission systems near Detroit, but there is no statewide failure there at this time. Ontario is dealing with partial outages and protective disconnections. Quebec remains unstable in several regions. What changed in the last half hour is the federal request to pause certain restoration attempts. That is not something the public hears often. Usually after a blackout, the message is that crews are working to restore power as quickly as possible. Tonight, the message is more complicated. Restore power where it is safe. Do not reconnect systems blindly. Avoid creating new failures by forcing energy into circuits that may not respond normally. That is where we are.
And the public is beginning to feel that change in messaging. Earlier tonight, local officials were saying crews were working on restoration. Now people are hearing that restoration may be delayed for safety reasons. That sounds contradictory unless you understand what emergency managers are afraid of. Bringing power back too fast can be dangerous even in a normal blackout. If equipment is damaged, if load is unbalanced, if circuits are flooded, if people have left appliances on, the return can cause fires or injuries. But tonight there is another layer. Officials are not only worried about damaged equipment, they are worried because some restored systems are not behaving in ways engineers expect. That is the part they are not saying loudly yet, but it is visible in their instructions. We have now seen advisories to disconnect non-essential equipment in several cities. We have seen hospitals told to verify isolation from the grid before relying on generator power. We have seen transit agencies told not to restart trains even if power appears to return briefly. And we have heard from emergency managers who say that power returning for a few seconds does not mean the system is safe.
A new emergency bulletin has just gone out in New York City. Residents are being asked to avoid using elevators even in buildings where partial power returns. That means if your building lights flicker back on, if hallway lights come on, if an elevator panel lights up, do not assume elevator service is safe. The city is also asking building managers to check stairwell access manually and assist residents who cannot use stairs. The fire department is responding to a high volume of elevator entrapments, alarm activations, and medical calls. They are prioritizing life safety. If you are trapped in an elevator and you can communicate, stay calm, do not attempt to force doors unless directed by emergency personnel, and conserve phone battery. In Philadelphia, officials are opening additional shelters. In Boston, the mayor's office says emergency crews have cleared several stalled transit trains and are moving passengers by bus where possible. In Providence, hospitals are asking people not to come to emergency departments for non-urgent needs. In Cleveland, a local emergency declaration is now in effect. The blackout has not reached the entire continent. We need to keep saying that. There are many places with power tonight, but the event is large enough now that federal agencies are treating it as a national infrastructure emergency.
John, we have confirmation from one utility engineer, speaking through an affiliate station and not using his name, that some of the affected substations are physically disconnected from remote control systems and still showing status changes on local equipment. I want to be careful here because we do not have the full technical context. But his concern is that this may not be just a software reporting issue. He says field crews are seeing breakers open after manual checks without a remote command appearing in the control logs. That does not mean no explanation exists. Protective relays can operate automatically. Equipment can trip because it detects unsafe conditions faster than humans can respond. But according to this engineer, the sequence does not match the fault conditions they are finding on site. He described it as the system refusing load. Those were his words. Not an official term in the bulletin, but very close to the language we heard earlier from the grid coordinator.
The system refusing load. That phrase is going to stay with people, but we should not turn it into more than it is. Power systems do not have will. They respond to conditions, commands, and protections. But when experienced engineers start reaching for language like that, it tells us the failure is behaving in a way that feels abnormal, even to people trained for abnormal situations. We have one more confirmed development. Parts of northern New Jersey briefly regained power approximately 12 minutes ago. The restoration lasted less than 2 minutes. During that time, several municipalities reported fire alarms, transformer noise, and a surge in 911 calls. Power then failed again. Utilities say they are investigating and that customers should not expect immediate restoration. We are also receiving widespread reports of screens turning on during that brief restoration. Gas station pumps, pharmacy displays, traffic message boards, home televisions, phones plugged into walls, airport monitors, most appear to have simply rebooted and shut down. But a number of people are reporting that screens displayed a plain text warning before going dark. We are not ready to report the wording yet. We are working to verify whether those images are real, whether they show the same message, and whether they could have come from a normal emergency alert or system reboot.
I have seen 3 of the images. They are from different towns in northern New Jersey. One is a gas station payment screen, one is a television in a dark living room, one is a digital sign inside a closed pharmacy. The wording appears similar but not identical in the photos, and that may be because some of the screens cut off the edges. The clearest one shows black text on a white background. It says, "Do not restore service." No logo, no agency name, no emergency alert header, just the sentence. Again, we do not know if that is authentic. It could be edited, it could be a prank. It could be a corrupted alert. It could be someone's local system displaying a maintenance message at a very strange time. But we are now hearing from enough people who say they saw something like it that we are asking authorities for comment.
We have not received that comment yet. To listeners, especially in affected areas, do not make decisions based on unverified screen messages. Follow instructions from local officials, emergency services, and utility providers. If power returns, use caution. Do not overload circuits. Do not enter elevators. Do not assume all systems are stable. But we are going to follow this message report closely because if the same phrase appeared across disconnected devices during a brief restoration, that would be a major development.
And John, even if it turns out to be a false lead, it has already captured the fear people are feeling. Do not restore service. That is the opposite of what everyone wants to hear. People are sitting in darkness waiting for the lights to come back, and now the rumor spreading through those same dark neighborhoods is that something, somewhere, is telling them not to turn the lights on.
Yes, we are going to continue verifying. For now, here is what we know at the end of this segment. A major blackout has affected much of the northeastern United States, with related disturbances in eastern Canada and the Great Lakes region. Restoration efforts are being slowed in some areas. Backup systems are under stress. Hospitals, airports, transit systems, and emergency services are operating under difficult conditions. Reports of abnormal electrical behavior are increasing, though not all are confirmed. And in the last few minutes, unverified images have emerged showing a possible warning during a brief power return in northern New Jersey. This is still developing. You're listening to Fictional Radio. I'm John Vale with Mara Ellison. We will continue live coverage of the North American blackout as this emergency broadcast continues into the next hour. We're continuing our coverage of the blackout now affecting large portions of the northeastern United States, parts of the Great Lakes region, and several areas of eastern Canada. I'm John Vale with Mara Ellison. In the last several minutes, the situation has changed in two important ways. The first is practical. Federal officials are now treating this as a national infrastructure emergency, not only a regional outage. That means coordination is moving beyond state utilities and emergency management agencies. FEMA, the Department of Energy, Homeland Security, the FAA, federal transportation officials, and Canadian emergency authorities are all now part of the response structure. The second change is harder to talk about because it is still being verified. We now have multiple reports from northern New Jersey, New York City, eastern Pennsylvania, and parts of Connecticut that electronic screens briefly displayed the same or similar text during short power returns. The phrase most often reported is simple: do not restore service. We are not presenting that as an official instruction. Let me be very clear about that. If you are in an affected area, follow local emergency guidance, not images circulating online. But the number of reports has increased enough that state officials have acknowledged they are reviewing them. That acknowledgement is new. Earlier they declined to comment. Now they are saying the reports are under technical review.
And John, that phrase has now appeared in too many kinds of places for people to dismiss it as one hacked sign or one doctored photo. We have received images from a pharmacy display, a gas station pump, a home television, an airport information screen, a bank ATM, and a traffic message board. Some may be fake. In any emergency, this large, edited images spread quickly, but local reporters have physically verified at least 2 locations where staff say they saw the message in real time before the devices shut down again. One of those locations was a municipal building in Bergen County. Staff were operating under flashlight after the power went out. For about 90 seconds, part of the building regained power. Not the whole building, just the emergency management office and a hallway outside it. During that window, a wall-mounted display that normally shows weather alerts and road closures came back on. A county employee says it showed a plain white screen with the words "Do not restore service" in black text. Then the power dropped again. The employee did not describe it as dramatic. That might be the most unsettling part. No alarm, no flashing warning, just a sentence, sitting there in a dark room where people had been trying all night to bring systems back online.
The Department of Homeland Security has now released a brief statement saying there is, in their words, no confirmed malicious actor behind the messages at this time. That does not rule out a cyber component. It only means officials are not prepared to say this is an attack. Cybersecurity teams are examining whether compromised alerting systems, building management software, or emergency notification networks could be responsible. The difficulty is that some of the affected devices should not be connected to the same network. A gas station pump, a television, a traffic sign, and a municipal alert display do not normally take instructions from one source. They may share software vendors. They may receive emergency alerts through overlapping channels. They may have been affected by corrupted data during restoration. There are explanations that do not require speculation beyond known technology, but each explanation runs into the same problem. Some reports involve devices that were offline before they turned on. We are hearing from more engineers now, some on background, some through local stations, all asking for caution. They do not want the public to think the grid is conscious. They do not want people imagining something mystical inside power lines. But several are saying, in different ways, that the event is not behaving like a classic grid collapse.
The human consequences are becoming more serious as this stretches on. We are now well beyond the point where most people can treat this as a temporary inconvenience. Cell towers are losing backup power in sections of New Jersey and eastern Pennsylvania. In parts of New York City, people can send texts only intermittently. Some 911 centers are routing calls through neighboring counties where lines are still functioning. Emergency responders are physically driving to certain neighborhoods to check on high-risk residents because dispatch systems are not reliable enough. In Queens, fire crews have been going building to building in one public housing complex after residents reported elderly people trapped on upper floors without working elevators. In Philadelphia, officials are asking people to avoid lighting stairwells with open flame after several small fires were reported in apartment buildings. In Boston, A major hospital has asked family members not to come unless contacted directly because roads nearby are crowded and emergency entrances need to remain clear. And in Cleveland, where the outage is newer, the mood is different. People there watched what happened in New York and New Jersey earlier tonight, so when their own power failed, they already knew this might not be quick. That changes the fear. It arrives faster.
The blackout has now reached parts of Indiana. We are getting confirmed outages around Fort Wayne and warnings from grid operators near South Bend. Chicago remains powered at this time, but officials there have activated emergency operations and are preparing for possible disruptions. The mayor's office is asking residents to avoid unnecessary use of electricity. That request may sound strange when power is still available, but it is part of a broader effort to reduce load and prevent sudden stress if portions of the regional grid disconnect. Detroit is now reporting scattered outages. Not citywide, but enough that emergency services are preparing for a wider event. Windsor, Ontario, across the river, is reporting flickering and partial failures in several districts. Again, that cross-border pattern is part of what makes this difficult. Power grids do cross borders. They are interconnected. But the timing and movement tonight are not lining up cleanly with normal failure pathways. We have also received confirmation from the FAA that all flights scheduled to depart from several affected airports remain grounded. Aircraft already in the air are being rerouted where necessary. Air traffic control facilities are operating under backup protocols. There is no indication of aircraft in immediate danger because of the blackout, but delays and diversions are now nationwide. Even airports with power are affected by crew displacement, fuel logistics, passenger overflow, and communication backups.
Train service is getting worse. Amtrak has suspended additional routes through the affected corridor. Local transit systems are still evacuating some stranded passengers, though most trains that lost power earlier have now been cleared. The bigger issue is what happens after people reach the surface. In a normal city emergency, buses pick up some of that load. Taxis, ride shares, personal cars, walking routes, traffic lights, train alternatives. Tonight, all of those systems are strained at the same time. There is a video from a bridge in New York showing people walking across in both directions, not in panic, just in long, slow lines. You can see phone lights and flashlights moving together, and below them, the river is black except for a few emergency boats. The skyline behind them is mostly gone. That is how it looks on camera, not dark buildings, gone buildings. The shapes are there only when aircraft lights blink or when a vehicle turns. And then in the middle of that video, several towers in lower Manhattan light up for less than a minute. Not fully, not normally, only certain vertical sections, almost like thin white bars against the darkness. People on the bridge stop walking. You can hear someone laugh once, the way people laugh when they do not know what else to do. Then the towers go black again.
We are continuing to receive reports of patterned light returns. That is the term some emergency managers are now using informally. Patterned light returns. It means power, or at least illumination, appearing briefly in parts of buildings, streets, or facilities in arrangements that do not match known restoration zones. Utilities have not confirmed that these patterns are meaningful, but they are investigating whether the appearances are caused by shared emergency lighting systems, staggered generator transfer switches, battery arrays, or building automation faults. In a city, many systems can light up independently of the main grid. Elevators, stairwells, data centers, security systems, aviation warning lights, signage, and emergency circuits may not follow the same pattern as residential power. That explanation may account for some reports. It does not account for all of them. We have just received a notice from the Department of Energy requesting that independent generation facilities in the affected regions maintain separation from unstable grid segments unless specifically cleared for reconnection. That includes certain solar farms, battery storage facilities, industrial cogeneration plants, and microgrids. The notice does not say those systems are failing. It says uncontrolled reconnection could complicate the wider response.
There are reports tonight of solar facilities producing power that is not reaching storage systems properly. That phrase has come up from 2 separate locations in Pennsylvania and 1 in New York. During daylight, that would have been easier to measure, but now most of those systems are operating from stored energy or are offline. Engineers are looking at logs from earlier today, and some are saying the irregularities began before the public noticed the blackout. That may turn out to be important. If generation and storage systems were showing strange behavior before the first major outage, Then the blackout did not begin when the lights went out. It began quietly, inside numbers and control screens, before ordinary people could see it. A grid operator in New York told one local reporter that the first sign was not darkness, it was excess. Power, where the model said there should not be power. Load dropping too quickly. Equipment protecting itself from conditions operators could not confirm physically. In his words, the map stopped agreeing with the ground.
That is not an official statement, but it is a useful way to understand the confusion. Control rooms rely on maps of the system, real-time data, expected flows, status indicators, sensor readings, and models. When those stop matching what field crews are seeing, operators can become blind in a very dangerous way. They may not know which lines are energized. They may not know which substations are safe. They may not know whether a dark area is truly de-energized or only dark from the customer side. That is one reason restoration is being paused. Utility crews cannot safely repair or reconnect a system they cannot read. We now have a federal emergency call scheduled with governors from affected states and provinces. We will bring you any public information from that as soon as it is available. For now, the guidance remains: conserve battery power, stay off roads unless necessary, check on vulnerable neighbors, avoid elevators, use generators safely, and rely on official sources. I also want to correct something from earlier. We said parts of Vermont were affected based on initial state emergency reports. Vermont officials are now saying outages there are scattered and may not be part of the main event. We will continue to update that. Corrections matter tonight because the map is changing and because overstating the scale can cause harm.
There is also a growing issue with rumor-driven movement. Some people are leaving cities because they believe more dangerous events are coming. Some are driving toward relatives in areas that still have power. Others are heading to gas stations that may not be working when they arrive. That movement is creating traffic problems around bridges, tunnels, and highways. Emergency officials are not ordering mass evacuations. In most affected areas, they are asking people to stay put if they are safe. There are exceptions for medical need, building-specific hazards, fires, and local orders. But a blackout is not automatically safer on the road. Traffic lights are out, fuel pumps may be dead, GPS and cell service are unreliable. Emergency vehicles need space. One family interviewed by a local station in New Jersey said they tried to drive to Pennsylvania, thinking power might be better there, but after 2 hours in traffic and no working gas stations, they turned around and went back home. Their apartment was dark, but at least they had water, neighbors, and a familiar stairwell. That is the kind of decision people are making tonight, and there are no perfect choices.
We now have an update from Chicago. The city is not under blackout conditions, but officials have opened the Emergency Operations Center. Hospitals are being asked to test generator systems. Public transit is running, but with contingency plans in place. The regional transmission operator has issued a maximum generation alert and is coordinating with utilities across the Midwest. Residents are being asked to reduce non-essential electricity use voluntarily. That suggests operators are trying to prevent the blackout from moving farther west. Whether they can do that depends on what this event actually is. Here is the clearest version of the technical problem as we understand it. The eastern grid is not one single wire, but it is highly interconnected. Disturbances can propagate if safeguards do not isolate failures quickly enough. Normally, protective systems trip parts of the grid offline to keep the rest stable. Tonight, those protective actions may be happening, but the disturbance appears to reappear in areas after isolation. That is one of the reasons officials are considering the possibility of something beyond a simple cascade. Cyber attack remains possible. Physical sabotage remains possible. A rare technical failure remains possible. Some combination of software, hardware, load behavior, and human response remains possible, but there is still no confirmed cause.
The screen messages are spreading as a story faster than any official statement. People in dark neighborhoods are sharing screenshots when they can. Some are walking images from phone to phone because mobile data is too weak to upload. In shelters, people are asking volunteers whether it is safe for the power to come back. Think about that. The thing everyone wanted 3 hours ago is now something people are afraid of. We have one shelter report from Connecticut where the lights came back on for just over a minute. People cheered at first. Then someone's phone, which was plugged into a wall outlet, turned on by itself and displayed the same phrase, "Do not restore service." Several people saw it. A volunteer unplugged the phone, but the screen stayed on for a few seconds before going black. That detail is not officially confirmed. It may not even be technically accurate. Phones can hold charge, screens can glitch, people under stress can misremember. But that is the report. What matters emotionally is that the room went quiet after that. Nobody cheered the next flicker.
We have just received a response from New Jersey Emergency Management. They are aware of reports of unauthorized text appearing on electronic devices during power restoration events. They are working with federal partners and utility providers to determine the source. They are asking the public not to treat these messages as official instructions unless confirmed through local emergency channels. Unauthorized text. That is the phrase they are using. That suggests they do not believe the messages came from a legitimate alert system, or at least they are not admitting that they did. We are also hearing that restoration attempts in parts of northern New Jersey have been halted again after the brief return caused what officials are calling anomalous device behavior. That phrase is broad. It could refer to the screen messages, it could refer to equipment alarms, it could refer to both. We are trying to get clarification.
John, we now have something from a hospital in Newark. This is coming through a local reporter who is at the facility. The hospital is on generator power. Most critical systems are functioning, but staff reported that several non-essential monitors in administrative areas came on, even though those offices were supposed to be disconnected. The monitors displayed the same warning. Hospital leadership then ordered those areas physically unplugged where possible. The reporter says patient care areas were not affected by the message, and the hospital is still operating. But there is obvious concern among staff. It is one thing for a pharmacy sign or a gas pump to show strange text. It is another for hospital equipment, even non-critical equipment, to appear to receive something while isolated from normal systems. I want to stress that no patient deaths have been reported from that incident. The hospital remains open. Emergency power is still being used. But the staff are now treating every power return as a hazard until proven otherwise.
That is a significant development if confirmed. We are now several hours into this emergency, and the pattern is becoming clearer in one sense, while the cause remains completely unclear. Darkness spreads. Operators pause restoration. Power returns briefly in some areas. During those returns, devices display a warning against restoration. Some equipment behaves as if it is receiving instructions or power through paths engineers do not expect. Then the power fails again. This is not enough to conclude intention. It is enough to conclude that restoration is no longer a straightforward process. The federal government has not issued a national emergency declaration yet, but that may be coming. Several states have already declared emergencies. Canadian officials are coordinating with U.S. agencies. Mexico's northern grid operators have reportedly been contacted as a precaution, though we do not have confirmed outages they are tied to this event.
We are beginning to hear from rural areas now, and those reports complicate the picture. In a normal cascading grid emergency, densely connected urban and industrial areas often dominate the story. But tonight, some small towns are going dark even when larger nearby areas stay lit. A county in central Pennsylvania reported outages across farms and small communities that are not directly tied to the urban failures people are watching on television when television works. One farmer told a local station that his barn lights came on after the house stayed dark. The barn was on a separate backup system that had been turned off manually because he was trying to conserve fuel. He said the lights came on anyway, dim at first, then bright enough that he could see animals moving inside. When he went toward the barn, the lights shut off. He checked the generator and said it was still cold. That is one person's account. It could be mistaken. It could be a wiring issue. But it matches the broader pattern. Isolated power where power should not be. Appearing briefly, then disappearing.
We need to be careful not to turn every strange report into evidence of the same thing. A continent-scale blackout will produce thousands of equipment failures, false alarms, half-remembered details, and coincidences. Some generators will fail mechanically. Some lights will flicker because of battery systems. Some screens will show corrupted text because software fails badly during shutdown. Some people will see things incorrectly in the dark. But official language has changed enough that we cannot dismiss the abnormal reports either. The Department of Energy is now using the phrase non-standard restoration behavior. Homeland Security is using unauthorized text. New Jersey is using anomalous device behavior. Grid operators are talking about load rejection and failed reconnection. Those phrases are technical, cautious, and incomplete, but together they describe a situation that is no longer just power out, power back later.
For listeners in areas that still have power, this is the moment to prepare without spiraling. Fill water containers if local officials recommend it. Charge phones and battery packs. Locate flashlights. Keep shoes near your bed. Make sure you can open your garage door manually. If you have medical devices, check backup options now. If someone in your family is in an affected area, send one clear message and then wait. Do not drain both your batteries trying to communicate through overloaded networks. For listeners in dark areas, we know those instructions may sound late. You are already doing the hard part. Stay together if you can. Avoid stairs unless you have light. Keep refrigerator doors closed. Use candles only if there is no safer option and never near curtains, bedding, or children. If you smell gas, leave immediately and alert emergency services if possible. If you see power return in a strange way, treat it cautiously. Light does not always mean safety tonight.
We are getting new information from the Midwest. Fort Wayne outages are expanding. South Bend is reporting partial failure. Chicago still has power, but there are now reports of flickering in several neighborhoods on the eastern side of the city. ComEd has not confirmed a major outage, but they are asking customers not to call unless they are reporting a specific hazard. That usually means call centers are becoming overloaded. We also have reports from Toronto that power returned briefly in several neighborhoods and then failed again. During that return, at least one public transit station display showed text that may match the warning seen in New Jersey. Canadian officials have not confirmed that. Toronto police are asking the public not to share unverified images that could create fear or confusion. That would be the first reported appearance of the message outside the United States.
And there is a psychological threshold there. A blackout crossing a border can still be infrastructure. A warning message crossing a border feels different to people, even if it is a shared software vulnerability, even if it is some corrupted alert protocol. It makes the event feel coordinated. That may be why officials are being so careful. We have noticed that official briefings are avoiding certain words. They are not saying attack, they are not saying intelligence, they are not saying phenomenon, they are saying event, instability, outage, behavior, message, restoration, words that describe pieces without naming a whole. That may be responsible communication. It may also mean they do not have a whole yet.
We now have a major update. The Department of Energy, in coordination with federal emergency authorities, is recommending that all utilities in the affected interconnection suspend broad restoration efforts for the next 30 minutes while grid conditions are assessed. Critical facilities may continue isolated power operations under emergency protocols, but broad reconnection attempts are to be paused. This is not a shutdown order for the whole country. It is not telling areas with power to turn power off. It applies to utilities attempting to restore areas already affected by the blackout. But it is still extraordinary. The reason given is repeated unsafe response during staged re-energization. Repeated unsafe response. That is the strongest official language so far.
For people in the dark, that means the lights may stay out longer because officials are afraid of what happens when they come back.
Yes, and we have another line in that bulletin. Utilities are being asked to report any unauthorized messaging, device activation, or load behavior inconsistent with known restoration commands. That means the federal government is now formally collecting reports of the kinds of things we have been discussing for the last hour: unauthorized messaging, device activation, load behavior inconsistent with known commands. Those are now part of the official response.
John, we should also say what this does not mean. It does not mean people should shut off medical equipment that is working. It does not mean hospitals should abandon generator power. It does not mean residents should tamper with electrical panels in the dark. It means utilities and trained facility operators are being asked to be cautious about reconnecting systems to wider networks. For ordinary people, the guidance remains simple. Stay safe. Do not overload circuits if power returns. Avoid elevators. Report hazards. Keep emergency lines clear. Use battery radios if you have them, and be careful with anything that produces flame or fumes.
That is right. We have just received a report from Pittsburgh. The city is not fully dark, but several neighborhoods are now experiencing outages. The Pennsylvania governor's office is expanding its emergency declaration statewide as a precaution. Western Pennsylvania was not at the center of this event earlier tonight. That has changed in the last 15 minutes. We are also hearing of instability warnings in West Virginia and Maryland, though confirmed outages there remain limited. The blackout is moving west and south, but not evenly. It is not a clean wave. It is not following a storm front. It is appearing in regions, skipping some areas, intensifying in others, and leaving utility operators uncertain about where it will show up next.
That unevenness is part of what makes it feel so unsettling. People can look across a river and see one city lit and another dark. They can see one building glowing while the one next to it is black. They can be in a neighborhood with no power and receive a message from someone 20 minutes away watching television. There is no clear boundary. The emergency does not give people a line they can stand behind. A reporter in Cleveland described it as living on the edge of a tide you cannot see. One block has headlights, porch lights, store signs. The next block is dark enough that people are walking in the street because they cannot see the sidewalk. Then, for a few seconds, a building lights up with no one inside and everyone stops. That is what people are experiencing. Not just outage, uncertainty from every direction.
We are also monitoring water systems. Several cities use electric pumps to maintain pressure. Backup systems exist, but prolonged outages can create boil water advisories, service interruptions, or firefighting limitations. Philadelphia officials say water pressure is stable but being monitored. New York says critical water infrastructure remains functional. Smaller municipalities may face problems sooner, especially if generators fail or fuel deliveries are delayed. Fuel is becoming another issue. Gas stations need electricity to pump fuel unless they have generator support. In areas where power remains on, lines are forming. Officials are asking people not to hoard fuel. Emergency services, hospital generators, cell towers, water systems, and shelters all depend on fuel logistics. Panic buying can directly harm response efforts. We have no evidence that food supply chains are collapsing, but refrigerated storage, grocery distribution, and payment systems are being affected locally. Some stores are closing, others are accepting cash only. In several cities, police are stationed near major retailers, not because of widespread violence, but to manage crowds and prevent accidents in dark parking lots.
There are also small acts of normalcy happening in the middle of this. A library in Connecticut opened its doors because it still had generator power and restrooms. A synagogue in New Jersey is serving as a charging site for medical devices. A high school gym outside Buffalo has cots ready in case the outage reaches farther west. In Boston, a group of college students used bike lights to mark a stairwell in an apartment building after emergency lights failed. We mention these things because fear narrows the picture. It makes the blackout feel like the only thing happening. But all over the affected region, people are making little pockets of order, not because they understand the emergency, but because someone has to hold a door, carry a bag, write down a name, share a flashlight. That does not erase the danger. It is just part of the truth.
We have an update on the reported message in Toronto. Canadian officials are not confirming the wording, but they have acknowledged that an unauthorized display occurred at a transit facility during a brief power restoration. That is carefully worded. They are not saying it matches the U.S. reports. They are not saying it does not. They are saying an unauthorized display occurred. At the same time, outages are expanding in southern Ontario. Toronto remains partially powered, but several neighborhoods are now dark. Ottawa is reporting flickering and scattered outages. Montreal is under emergency monitoring, but not a full blackout. The Canadian federal government is expected to speak within the hour. This is now clearly a cross-border emergency.
We also have the first reports from northern Mexico, though they are limited and not yet connected. Utilities in parts of Nuevo León are reporting voltage irregularities. Monterrey has not lost power on a wide scale. Mexican authorities are coordinating with U.S. grid operators as a precaution. We should be careful not to overstate that. But for the first time tonight, officials in all three North American countries are watching the same event.
And that is why the phrase North American blackout is now accurate, even if the entire continent is not dark. The emergency has crossed national systems, regulatory boundaries, and normal restoration assumptions. We are now several hours into what began as a regional outage. The situation remains fluid. The cause remains unknown. The official response has shifted from restore quickly to restore carefully. Reports of unauthorized messages are now part of federal data collection. Backup systems are under stress. Outages are expanding westward and into parts of Canada, and the public is beginning to understand that tonight may not end with a simple return of light.
John, there is one more report I think we need to mention carefully. It comes from a power control center in Pennsylvania, through a local journalist who has been reliable tonight. Operators there were monitoring dark regions after the restoration pause. No broad reconnection was underway. During that pause, a cluster of customer meters reportedly came alive on the control map, not powered in the normal sense. The system showed them active. Field crews in the area said the neighborhood was still dark. Then those active meters appeared to move, not physically, obviously. The readings changed from one group of meters to another nearby group, like a pattern traveling down a street. The operators thought it was a software visualization fault. Then residents on that same street began calling to report porch lights turning on one house at a time. The lights went out before crews arrived.
We do not have official confirmation of that. We should say that clearly. But if that report is accurate, it would suggest that some part of the system is registering power movement where operators have not commanded it. Again, that does not mean intention. It does not mean intelligence. It means the data and the physical world are interacting in ways operators cannot yet explain.
People in that neighborhood reportedly came outside when the porch lights started turning on. One resident described it as looking like someone walking down the block, touching each house, except there was no one there. The lights did not all come on together. They came on in order, house by house, porch by porch. Then the last house went dark, and after that, the whole street stayed black.
We are going to keep that as an unconfirmed report unless state officials address it. But I want to be honest about the tone in the studio right now. We are used to covering fictional emergencies, and within those emergencies, we are used to uncertainty. This is different because every answer officials give seems to create a new question. Why did the blackout spread beyond expected grid paths? Why are restoration attempts producing unsafe responses? Why are devices showing unauthorized text? Why are isolated systems activating? Why are some light returns patterned? And why are utilities being asked to pause the very thing everyone is waiting for? Those questions do not have answers yet. We are not going to invent them.
What we can do is stay with the verified picture and keep the human one visible. The verified picture is that millions are without power, response systems are under stress, and authorities are slowing restoration until they understand the risk. The human picture is that people are waiting in the dark, listening for sirens, checking phones that may not turn on, watching windows for light, and wondering whether light is still good news.
That may be the defining change tonight. At the beginning, darkness was the emergency. Now, in some places, the return of power has become part of the emergency. We have another federal briefing expected shortly. State officials from New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, New Jersey, and Massachusetts are also expected to speak. We will bring you the substance of those briefings as we receive it. For now, the restoration pause remains in effect for affected utilities. Critical facilities are operating under isolated emergency protocols where possible. Outages continue across major parts of the Northeast, are expanding through sections of the Great Lakes region, and are appearing in parts of eastern Canada. Reports of unauthorized messaging and abnormal light patterns are under investigation. Stay where you are if you are safe. Keep roads clear. Check on those nearby. Conserve batteries. Treat returning power cautiously. We'll continue.
And for anyone sitting in a dark room right now, hearing us through a small radio, through a car speaker, through a phone with 3% left, you are not alone in this. That may not fix anything, but it matters. There are people working on this. There are responders moving through dark streets right now. There are utility crews standing in substations with flashlights and hard hats, trying to read equipment that no longer agrees with their screens. There are nurses holding rooms together on generator power. There are dispatchers taking calls by hand. There are neighbors knocking on doors. The blackout is big, but it is not bigger than everyone inside it.
We have just received one more bulletin before the hour turns. The restoration pause has been extended. Utilities in affected regions are now being instructed to maintain separation between dark zones and powered zones wherever possible. The reason given is unexplained propagation during attempted re-energization. Unexplained propagation. That means the disturbance may be moving when power is reintroduced. We do not know what that disturbance is, but officials now appear to believe that trying to turn the lights back on may be helping it spread.
That changes everything.
Yes, that changes everything. We are going to stay on this. I'm John Vale with Mara Ellison. This is continuing coverage of the North American blackout. We're continuing our coverage of the blackout now affecting major portions of the northeastern United States, the Great Lakes region, and parts of eastern Canada. I'm John Vale with Mara Ellison. The restoration pause has been extended again. That is the most important confirmed development at this hour. Utilities across affected regions are being told not to attempt broad reconnection unless cleared through coordinated emergency channels. critical facilities can continue using isolated backup power where that backup power is stable, but the wider grid is not being brought back all at once. Officials are now saying that some restoration attempts appear to be associated with additional failures in nearby areas. That is cautious language, but the meaning is serious. They are worried the disturbance is moving through the act of restoration. We still do not know what the disturbance is. Federal officials have not identified a foreign actor. They have not announced a cyber attack. They have not confirmed solar weather, equipment sabotage, or any single originating failure. In fact, the deeper this emergency goes, the less the first explanations seem to fit. A normal cascade should follow stress through connected systems. A cyber attack should reveal signatures, targets, command paths, compromised networks. A storm leaves weather behind it. A physical attack leaves damaged equipment. Tonight, operators are seeing effects without a clean cause. Several grid control centers are now operating under what one state official described as manual confidence protocols. That means engineers are being told to trust confirmed field observations over remote status displays when the two disagree. If a control room screen says a circuit is open, but a crew on site detects voltage, the crew's reading wins. If a map says a neighborhood has partial restoration, but local responders say the streets are dark, the responder's report is treated as primary. That may sound obvious, but it is a major step backward technologically. Modern grids depend on real-time visibility. Operators manage enormous systems through layers of sensors, automated protections, remote controls, forecasting software, and communication networks. Tonight, pieces of that visibility are unreliable enough that crews are having to return to slower physical confirmation. People with flashlights, meters, radios, and paper maps are becoming the most trusted part of the system, and that slows everything down. We are now receiving reports of power instability as far west as Illinois and Missouri. Chicago has not gone dark, but several neighborhoods have experienced brief outages and flickering. St. Louis officials have activated emergency operations and are asking hospitals, water facilities, and transit agencies to prepare for possible isolation from the grid. Kansas City is monitoring for irregularities. Minneapolis is not reporting major effects, but emergency managers there have opened coordination channels because of the uncertainty in the Midwest. In the South, Maryland and Northern Virginia are seeing scattered outages. Washington, D.C. remains largely powered, though federal buildings are operating under heightened continuity protocols. Several government facilities have switched to internal power as a precaution. Officials are saying that is normal during infrastructure emergencies, and it is, but the number of agencies involved tonight is not normal. Canada's situation has worsened. Toronto is now experiencing rolling blackout conditions across several districts, though officials there are avoiding that phrase because they do not control the outages in the usual way. Ottawa is reporting intermittent power loss. Montreal remains partially stable, but Hydro-Quebec has warned of abnormal transmission behavior and is limiting certain transfers. Canadian officials are asking residents in affected areas to reduce power usage when power is available, keep roads open, and avoid relying on elevators. There are also confirmed voltage irregularities in northern Mexico, though no major blackout has been announced there. Mexican federal energy officials are coordinating with U.S. and Canadian counterparts. I want to repeat that carefully. There is no confirmed major Mexican outage tied to this event, but officials there are watching the same system-level behavior with enough concern to join continental coordination. This is no longer a northeastern blackout. It is a North American grid emergency. The language from federal authorities has shifted again. They are now referring to electrical noncompliance within affected systems. That phrase is unusual. Electrical systems do not comply or refuse to comply in any human sense. They function or they fail. But in engineering language, noncompliance can mean a system is not behaving according to expected parameters or commands. It does not mean intent. It means commands are being issued and the response is wrong. The wrong response is now the center of the crisis.
The scale is becoming visible in shelters now. Early tonight, shelters were mostly a place for people who needed power for medical devices, people caught in transit, people trapped away from home. Now they are becoming information centers. People are arriving not only because they need heat or light or charging stations, but because they do not know what is happening and their phones cannot tell them. In a school gym outside Philadelphia, volunteers have taped handwritten updates to the wall because the projector will not stay on. The first paper says the outage is regional. The next says statewide emergency declared. The next says do not use elevators. The next says restoration delayed. Then, underneath that, someone wrote in marker, power returns may be temporary. People are standing in front of those papers reading them over and over because paper is the only screen that does not go black. In Queens, emergency workers carried several residents down stairwells from upper floors after backup lighting failed. One woman interviewed outside the building kept saying she had never heard the city so quiet, not that it was silent, because it was not. There were sirens, people shouting, generators, helicopters somewhere above the clouds, but the background sound was gone, the hum that people stop hearing because it is always there. She said without it, every noise felt closer. At a hospital in Newark, staff are moving through administrative offices, unplugging equipment that should already be offline. That is the part that frightens people there. Not the dark hallways. They expected that. Not the generator rules. They trained for that. What they did not expect was to find monitors glowing in rooms that had been locked and disconnected, showing a warning no one sent. The hospital remains operational. Patients are being cared for. But the staff are no longer treating power as a simple resource. They are treating it as something that has to be handled, watched, and contained.
We have an update from the Department of Energy. It is technical and the language is dense, but I'm going to walk through it because it explains why the response is becoming so slow. Federal officials say restoration teams have documented 3 categories of abnormal behavior. The first is failed re-energization, where operators attempt to restore power to a segment and the segment immediately trips back offline without a clear fault. The second is unauthorized activation, where equipment or devices appear to turn on outside the expected restoration path. The third is propagated instability, where a restoration attempt in one area appears to precede disturbances in another area that should have been electrically isolated or only weakly connected. All 3 of those are now officially acknowledged. That matters because the emergency is no longer being described only by what the public can see. It is being described by what engineers are unable to make happen. They cannot simply restore the system. They cannot fully trust system maps. They cannot guarantee that isolated equipment will remain isolated. They cannot yet explain why messages are appearing on devices during brief power returns, and until they can explain those things, they are slowing down. The phrase "do not restore service" remains under investigation. Homeland Security says analysts are examining whether the message could have originated from a compromised emergency notification pathway, but several agencies now admit the message has appeared on devices not normally configured to receive such alerts. That does not mean the devices received it magically. It means investigators do not yet know the transmission path. There is a difference between impossible and unexplained. Tonight we are still in unexplained, but we are moving deeper into it. We are also receiving reports from utilities that some battery storage systems drained unexpectedly while disconnected from the grid. That may have conventional causes. Batteries can discharge under fault conditions. Monitoring systems can misreport charge. Inverters can fail. But the same report is now appearing from multiple sites. One battery facility in eastern Pennsylvania reportedly dropped from 74% capacity to 0 in less than 4 minutes after operators isolated it. The thermal systems did not show the kind of heat buildup expected from a normal discharge. The energy did not go where the monitoring system expected it to go. That sentence is where engineers become quiet. Energy does not simply disappear. It transfers. It converts. It heats something, moves something, charges something, lights something, damages something. If a monitoring system says energy left and field sensors cannot identify where it went, either the monitoring is wrong, the sensors are wrong, or there is a path no one has identified. No one in authority is saying energy vanished. They are saying the measurements do not reconcile. That is careful language. It may be all they can honestly say. We have just received confirmation that several major data centers in Northern Virginia have switched to full isolation mode. Northern Virginia is one of the most important data center regions in the country. These facilities have robust backup systems, but they are deeply connected to power infrastructure. Operators there are not reporting widespread failure, but they are preparing for potential grid disturbances. That has implications beyond lights and buildings. It affects cloud services, financial transactions, communications platforms, government systems, hospital records, and ordinary websites people rely on for information. The blackout is physical, but it is also becoming digital. Payment systems are failing in some stores. Cellular networks are overloaded or down. Internet service providers are losing neighborhood equipment. Emergency alert apps are not reliable in dark zones. In some places, local radio has become the most stable information source because it can operate from backup transmitters and people can receive it on simple devices. That is why we keep repeating verified guidance. Stay off roads unless necessary. Avoid elevators. Conserve batteries. Check on vulnerable neighbors. Use generators outdoors only. Treat returning power cautiously. Do not follow unverified messages that appear on screens. Do not assume power returning means the system is stable. And now there is another piece. The North American Electric Reliability Corporation is coordinating with federal authorities on what one official called a continental segmentation strategy. That means operators may deliberately split parts of the grid into smaller islands to stop the disturbance from propagating. Power grids can operate in islands under certain conditions. It is difficult, risky, and not always possible, especially at this scale. But if reconnecting large regions spreads the problem, then isolating regions may be safer. This could mean some places with power are intentionally kept separate from places without power. It could mean dark zones remain dark longer. It could mean certain cities are restored on local generation before they are reconnected to the wider grid. It could mean crews physically open switches, remove connections, or disable automated reconnection. It is the opposite of the normal instinct after a blackout. Instead of stitching the system back together, they may begin cutting it apart.
People are beginning to notice that division. On the edge of affected areas, you can stand in one town and see the next town lit. Sometimes the lit town cannot help the dark one because officials do not want the systems reconnected yet. That is hard to explain to someone looking at lights a mile away. In western Pennsylvania, one local official said they had residents asking why a hospital had power while surrounding homes did not. The answer was that the hospital was on isolated backup and could not safely feed power outward. But when people are tired and scared, that answer feels like withholding, even when it is not. Emergency managers are now dealing not only with the technical crisis, but with trust. Why is my street dark? Why did that building light up? Why are they saying not to restore service? Why did my screen show a warning no one claims to have sent? At a shelter near Cleveland, a volunteer described people cheering when a bank of lights came on, then ducking away from the outlets because the warning message had spread so widely that nobody wanted to plug in first. She said one man stood there holding a phone charger like it was dangerous. That image stayed with me. A charger in someone's hand, and he does not know whether power is help or threat. There are children sleeping on gym mats under emergency lamps. Parents are trying not to talk too loudly. People are passing around rumors in whispers even when they know they should not. They ask whether this is a cyber attack, whether it is war, whether it is something in the atmosphere, whether it is safe to go home. Most volunteers cannot answer. They can offer water, a place to sit, a paper form, a blanket, maybe a working outlet if the generator holds. Tonight, that is what certainty looks like.
We are now getting more from the federal briefing. I'll summarize the parts that have been cleared for public release. Federal officials are asking utilities and critical infrastructure operators in unaffected regions to review procedures for black start operations. A black start is the process of restoring power without relying on the wider grid. After a total or partial shutdown, certain power plants can start independently, energize local lines, and gradually rebuild the system. It is one of the most important recovery tools after a major blackout. The fact that black start procedures are being reviewed does not mean officials expect the entire continent to lose power. It means they are preparing for the possibility that large regions may need to be restored from isolated sources instead of from the connected grid. That aligns with the segmentation strategy. Officials are also instructing utilities to preserve logs, sensor data, and physical equipment states. That tells us investigators expect a long analysis after this. They are not treating tonight as something that will be understood by morning. The cyber question remains open. Federal cyber teams are engaged. They are looking at grid management systems, emergency alert systems, building automation platforms, inverter controls, smart meters, data links, satellite timing systems, and vendor software. But at least publicly, they are not reporting evidence of a single command intrusion capable of explaining everything. The more diverse the affected devices become, the harder a simple cyber explanation becomes, unless the compromise is buried deep in something shared by far more systems than people realize. One possibility being discussed by experts is timing. Modern electrical systems rely on precise timing signals for synchronization, monitoring, transactions, communications, and control. If timing data became corrupted across many systems, it could create failures that look unrelated. But that would not easily explain lights turning on in physical patterns or devices displaying coherent messages. It might explain some of the chaos. It would not explain all of it. Another possibility is that the screen messages are separate from the grid event. A cyber actor could be exploiting the blackout to spread fear. That remains plausible, but officials are now treating the messages and the electrical behavior as connected enough to investigate together. Again, that does not mean one cause. It means they are not comfortable separating them yet. We have new reports from Chicago. The city has experienced a brief power dip across multiple downtown buildings. Most systems recovered, several elevators stopped temporarily and have been cleared. Transit remains operational with delays. However, a digital billboard near the expressway reportedly flashed the phrase, "Service is being denied," before going dark. That phrase is new. We are working to verify the image. It resembles the earlier warning but is not identical. Let me repeat that this is unverified, but if accurate, it would represent a change in message wording. "Do not restore service" was an instruction. "Service is being denied" sounds like an explanation. We are not going to speculate beyond that.
I'm seeing the image now from Chicago. It is from inside a car, taken through a windshield, so there is glare and rain on the glass. The billboard is mostly dark, but the text appears across the center in plain white. No advertisement, no logo, no emergency header, just that sentence. Cars are stopped beneath it because traffic lights nearby are flashing red. There are people in the replies saying it is fake. There are people saying they drove under the same sign and saw it. We cannot verify it from the image alone, but a local traffic reporter has now said on air that the billboard did display an unauthorized message during the outage. She did not read the wording. That is probably because officials have asked local stations not to amplify unverified text, and yet people are seeing it with their own eyes. That is the problem for authorities tonight. You can ask people not to spread fear, but you cannot ask them to unsee a sentence glowing over a dark highway.
The governor of Illinois is expected to speak soon. Chicago remains powered, but the city is preparing for possible outages. Hospitals are moving to heightened readiness. O'Hare and Midway are not closed, but delays are increasing. Some inbound flights are being diverted as a precaution because ground systems may become unstable if the grid worsens. Again, aircraft are not falling out of the sky. We should be precise. Aviation systems have layers of backup. The issue is ground operations, communications, passenger handling, fueling, and safety margins. We now have scattered reports from St. Louis. Several neighborhoods experience flickering. A utility spokesperson says there is no major outage, but they are monitoring irregular load behavior. The phrase irregular load behavior has become common tonight. It is the kind of phrase that sounds technical enough to reassure no one. Let's step back for a moment and explain what would normally happen in a large blackout. Operators identify the fault, isolate damaged sections, stabilize generation, restore critical services, then gradually re-energize circuits while monitoring load. It is slow, but it has a direction. Tonight, the direction is uncertain because restoration itself may be creating new instability. That forces operators into a defensive posture. Keep what is still working. Keep unaffected regions away from affected ones. Keep critical services isolated. Keep people safe in the dark, rather than risk a dangerous return of power. That last part is very hard. Darkness is dangerous. People fall. Medical devices fail. Food spoils. Water systems weaken. Traffic accidents increase. Crime can rise. Fires become harder to fight. Emergency communications degrade. No official wants to keep people in a blackout longer than necessary. If they are doing it, it means the alternative appears worse. We have a new advisory from New York City. Building owners are being asked to shut down non-essential electrical systems manually where safe to do so and to prevent automatic elevator restart. Fire alarms are malfunctioning in some buildings due to power fluctuation. Residents are asked not to ignore alarms, but also not to assume every alarm indicates fire. Fire crews are triaging calls. That is a difficult message to send, but it is honest. In New Jersey, several municipalities are asking residents to place a light or cloth near windows only if emergency assistance is needed. Officials are trying to avoid confusion, with people using flashlights casually. This is the level of improvisation happening now. Cities creating low-tech signals because high-tech systems cannot be trusted everywhere. In Pennsylvania, the state police are helping escort fuel shipments to hospitals and emergency sites. In Ohio, the National Guard has been activated for logistics and welfare checks. In Massachusetts, additional shelters are opening in schools, arenas, and municipal buildings with stable generator support. In Ontario, transit agencies are staging buses near subway stations in case more evacuations are needed. That is the response picture. It is large, it is serious, it is still functioning.
There is another picture, too, the one inside homes. We've heard from a man in Connecticut who said his daughter kept asking when the refrigerator would start humming again, not when the lights would come back, the refrigerator, because that was the sound that meant the house was normal. We've heard from a woman in Toronto whose apartment building lost power, regained hallway lights for 30 seconds, then lost them again. She said nobody on her floor wanted to open their doors at first because the light came from the hallway, but no one had touched the switch. Eventually someone did, and people began checking on each other. In Newark, a nurse sent a message before her phone died saying the hospital generator sounded like the only heartbeat in the building. In Cleveland, a radio host on a local station has been reading names of open shelters between updates, and you can hear paper moving every time she turns a page because their digital list is down. In Brooklyn, people are using glow sticks from old emergency kits. In Philadelphia, someone brought a battery-powered speaker outside and played music quietly until police asked them to turn it off because people were mistaking the crowd for a shelter line. Everything ordinary becomes part of the emergency. A stairwell, a phone charger, a refrigerator, a hallway light, a piece of paper taped to a wall, and then over all of that, the question nobody can answer, what happens when the power comes back?
We have just received confirmation of a second message wording from federal authorities. Officials are not saying where it appeared, but they are acknowledging that at least one unauthorized display contained the phrase, "Service is being denied." They are asking media outlets not to present unauthorized messages as instructions from any government agency. We will follow that request while still reporting the fact that the phrase has been acknowledged. So there are now at least two confirmed unauthorized phrases. The first, "Do not restore service." The second, "Service is being denied." That changes the nature of the message investigation. The wording is not random corrupted text. It is coherent. It relates directly to the emergency. It appears during power return events. It has now been acknowledged by authorities. What remains unknown is source, method, intent, and whether the messages are part of the electrical disturbance or exploiting it. The federal government is not calling this communication. That is important. They are calling it unauthorized display activity. They are not attributing meaning beyond the words themselves. But words have meaning to the public, whether officials are ready or not. The president is expected to address the nation if conditions worsen further or if a national emergency declaration is issued. At this moment, the White House says the president remains in secure coordination with state and federal officials. Continuity systems are functioning. There is no threat to federal command authority. That statement may sound excessive, but during a multi-state blackout with unexplained messages, officials want to prevent rumors about government incapacitation. We have heard those rumors. They are false. Government agencies are operating. Emergency management is operating. State authorities are operating. Canada's government is operating. Mexican authorities are monitoring. The response is strained, but it has not collapsed. There is also no verified evidence of mass violence in affected cities. There are isolated incidents, as there always are in emergencies, some burglar alarms, some fights at gas stations, some traffic conflicts, but the widespread image of cities descending instantly into lawlessness is not supported by what police departments are reporting. Most people are trying to get home, find family, charge phones, protect neighbors, or wait. We should not let the strangeness of this event erase the ordinary decency happening inside it. Now, on the technical side, the continental segmentation strategy is beginning. Several utilities have confirmed intentional isolation of grid sections. That means switches are being opened not because equipment failed, but because operators want to create fire breaks. Think of it less like repairing a web and more like cutting lines so a fire cannot move through them. That analogy is imperfect, but it helps. Some areas may lose power because of protective isolation, even if they were not directly affected. That will be frustrating and frightening. Officials may deliberately darken a system to keep it from becoming part of the disturbance. We are already hearing complaints from communities that lost power only after utilities began isolating zones. Officials will need to explain those decisions clearly because from the public side it looks like authorities caused the outage. From the grid side, they may be preventing a worse one.
And the public side is where fear lives. People do not see transmission maps. They see the street light outside their window die. They see the apartment across the road stay lit. They see an ambulance stop at an intersection because no one knows who has the right of way. They see a message on a screen and then officials say not to treat it as official, but they do not say where it came from. Trust is being tested in small moments. When a police officer tells a crowd to move away from a dark subway entrance, when a utility truck drives past a neighborhood without stopping, when a shelter says it has no more outlets available, when a mayor says restoration is delayed for safety and people hear only delayed. In one neighborhood outside Pittsburgh, residents formed a line at a fire station because they thought it was a distribution point for generators. It was not. The station had only enough generator capacity for its own emergency operations. The firefighters ended up handing out water and writing down addresses for wellness checks. One of them told a local reporter, "We can't give them power, so we're giving them proof someone knows they're there." That may be the most honest description of the response right now.
We are approaching a critical period. Night deepens across the affected region. Temperatures are manageable in most places, but darkness itself creates risk. Emergency crews are stretched. Restoration remains paused or limited. Utilities are cutting and isolating grid sections. Unauthorized messages have been confirmed in at least 2 wordings. Power anomalies continue, and now operators are trying to prevent the disturbance from reaching deeper into the Midwest and South. The latest map shows major outages continuing across New York City, northern New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, parts of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts. Significant outages are present in Cleveland, parts of northern Ohio, portions of southern Ontario, and scattered areas in western Pennsylvania. Toronto is partially affected. Ottawa has intermittent disruptions. Chicago is not under major blackout, but has experienced disturbances. St. Louis is preparing. Washington remains powered but under protective federal protocols. We are also tracking reports from the southeast. North Carolina and Georgia have been asked to prepare emergency response assets, not because outages are confirmed there, but because mutual aid may be requested. Utility crews from unaffected states are normally sent into blackout zones. Tonight, sending crews is more complicated because the equipment they would repair may not be safe to reconnect. Still, crews are staging. The American Red Cross and similar organizations in Canada are opening shelters and coordinating supplies. Hospitals are requesting fuel priority. Dialysis centers are contacting patients. Nursing homes are being checked. Local governments are asking residents to conserve water in some areas, not because water is gone, but because maintaining pressure depends on systems that may not remain stable through the night. That is where the practical emergency stands. Now to the part that is harder. We have received a report from a utility monitoring center that has been partially corroborated by 2 local officials. During a complete restoration pause in part of Pennsylvania, with no authorized re-energization underway, a pattern of brief activations appeared across several disconnected devices. Porch lights, building lobby lights, 2 traffic signals, and a row of exterior security lamps turned on in sequence across a small area. The sequence lasted less than a minute. It moved east to west. After it ended, operators detected a brief disturbance in a separate grid segment farther west. Officials are not saying the 2 events are connected, but they are investigating them together. That is the closest official language has come to describing the light patterns as something that may be moving. Again, no one is saying intelligence, no one is saying entity. No one is saying anything like that. We should not put words in their mouths. But a moving pattern of activation followed by instability somewhere else is exactly the kind of thing that would make operators extend a restoration pause. If the system goes dark and stays dark, they can work with that. If the system responds to restoration attempts unpredictably, they can slow down. But if power-like behavior is appearing without command and moving through supposedly disconnected spaces, then the map is not merely unreliable. The map may be incomplete.
The people in that Pennsylvania neighborhood apparently saw the lights move before anyone told them there was a technical event. That is important. This was not a case of someone reading a rumor and imagining it. Residents called it in because it frightened them. A woman on that street told a local station that the first porch light came on at the corner house, then the next, then the next. She said it moved too slowly to be a surge and too evenly to be random. Her husband thought maybe power was coming back block by block, but the houses themselves stayed dark inside. Only the porch lights. She said when the sequence reached the end of the block, the traffic signal at the intersection turned green in the direction the lights had moved. It stayed green for maybe 5 seconds, then went black. No cars were moving through because police had already blocked the road. That image is going to stay with people. A green light on an empty road in a city with no power, pointing west.
We have not independently verified every detail of that resident's account, but the broader incident is now under official review. We are getting another alert now. Chicago officials are asking residents to prepare for possible controlled power reductions. That means parts of the city may be intentionally taken offline to reduce stress and maintain separation from unstable grid segments. The city is asking people to charge essential devices immediately, locate flashlights, avoid unnecessary travel, and check on neighbors who may need assistance. This does not mean Chicago is about to go fully dark. It means officials are preparing to act before a larger failure acts for them. At the same time, Toronto officials are asking residents in powered areas to reduce usage immediately. They are warning that additional outages may occur with little notice. Canadian authorities are using similar language to U.S. officials now. Staged restoration, unauthorized displays, abnormal system behavior, critical infrastructure priority. The continental response is becoming unified because the event is forcing it to be. We have one more technical note. Several operators are reportedly disabling automatic reclosing systems. These systems are designed to restore power automatically after certain faults clear. For example, if a branch touches a line and then falls away, the system may try to reclose the circuit after a moment. That is useful in normal conditions. Tonight, automatic reconnection may be dangerous, so crews are turning off automation and requiring manual approval. That means the grid is becoming slower, more human, and more deliberate. It also means if outages expand, restoration will take longer even after the cause is contained.
And that slower response may save lives even if it feels unbearable in the moment. A dark building is frightening. A building that comes alive unpredictably may be worse. A stopped elevator is dangerous. An elevator that restarts without control is more dangerous. A dead traffic light is a hazard. A traffic light that turns green for no reason can create a disaster. People keep asking whether they should want the power back. The answer is still yes, of course. But now the better answer is, you want it back safely, in a way that stays. That is what officials are trying to do, even if they cannot explain all of it yet.
We have just received another federal bulletin. This is important. All affected utilities are being instructed to document any light pattern, display message, unauthorized device activation, or abnormal meter behavior with exact location, time, and physical isolation status. They are also being asked to avoid public speculation and route reports through emergency coordination centers. That means the phenomena we have been discussing are now part of formal national reporting categories: light pattern, display message, unauthorized device activation, abnormal meter behavior. Those are official categories now. We are now beyond isolated weirdness. The federal response has built a reporting structure around the anomalies. The cause remains unknown, but the government is no longer treating these reports as background noise. There is also a new warning to utilities: do not attempt to answer or interact with unauthorized messages. That is an unusual line. It may refer to cybersecurity teams being told not to respond through compromised systems. It may mean operators should not input commands into devices displaying messages. We do not have clarification, but I will repeat it as official guidance for operators, not the public. Do not attempt to answer or interact with unauthorized messages.
That word, answer, is going to raise questions.
It is, and we should be careful with it. In cybersecurity, to answer a message might mean to respond to a prompt, click through a system, acknowledge an alert, send a command, or connect diagnostic equipment. It does not necessarily mean anyone believes something is talking. But yes, the wording will raise questions. We have to stay disciplined here. There is no confirmed non-human intelligence. There is no confirmed entity in the grid. There is no official statement suggesting consciousness, communication, or intent. What we have is an electrical emergency with coherent, unauthorized messages and abnormal activation patterns. That is strange enough without adding anything unsupported. We are going to pause for a moment to let that picture settle. Not a broadcast pause, but a reset for listeners who may be joining us now. A blackout began in the northeastern United States several hours ago. It spread beyond expected grid behavior, Restoration attempts produced unsafe responses. Brief returns of power were accompanied by unauthorized messages on various devices. Outages expanded into the Great Lakes and parts of eastern Canada. Utilities were told to pause broad restoration. Operators began isolating grid sections. Now federal authorities are formally tracking light patterns, display messages, device activations, and meter anomalies. Millions are affected. The cause is unknown. The response is ongoing. If you are in an affected area, your safest course remains the same. Stay in a safe place. Avoid elevators. Use flashlights instead of candles when possible. Keep generators outside. Check on vulnerable neighbors. Limit travel. Treat returning power cautiously. Follow local emergency instructions. If you are in an area with power, prepare without panic. Charge essentials. Reduce non-essential electricity use if asked. Do not flood emergency lines with general questions. Do not spread unverified images. Be ready for outages, but do not assume the worst.
We are receiving a lot of messages from people outside the blackout zone asking what they can do. The best answers are practical. Do not call relatives every 2 minutes if their phone is dying. Send one useful message. Offer your home if travel later becomes safe. Donate to local emergency groups if official channels request it. Save fuel unless you need it. Do not drive toward the emergency just to pick someone up unless you know where they are and roads are passable. And emotionally, understand that people inside this are hearing fragments. They may not know what you know. They may have seen something frightening that is not in the official briefing yet. They may be scared of the dark, scared of the light, or just tired of waiting. Be patient with them. In a blackout, information becomes a kind of power, too. Use it carefully.
We have a developing situation in Chicago. Controlled power reductions have begun in limited areas. The city is describing them as precautionary. Several downtown buildings have switched to generator or internal systems. Some neighborhoods on the south and west sides are reporting outages. Officials say these are not yet comparable to the failures in New York or Cleveland. They are controlled measures intended to prevent wider instability. However, during the first controlled reduction, multiple traffic cameras reportedly captured a line of streetlights illuminating along an empty service road after the circuit had been taken offline. The lights came on for approximately 9 seconds. They illuminated from east to west, then they shut down. A nearby substation reported abnormal readings shortly after. Chicago officials have not confirmed the sequence publicly, but we have heard the same description from 2 separate emergency sources. This resembles the Pennsylvania report. If confirmed, it suggests the light pattern phenomenon is not limited to one state or one utility. And now, there is an additional concern. In both the Pennsylvania and Chicago reports, the direction of the light sequence was westward. That may be coincidence. It may reflect the orientation of circuits, streets, restoration paths, camera angles, or reporting bias. But federal analysts are looking at directional patterns. That is all we can responsibly say.
People in Chicago have watched this approach all night through other cities. That makes the first controlled outages feel like a warning they already heard hours ago. There are lines at stores that still have power. Some people are leaving downtown. Others are being told to stay because transit is still safer than roads in certain places. Hotels are moving guests away from upper floors when possible. Hospitals are canceling non-essential procedures. Police are preparing for dark intersections. There is an image from the Riverwalk where the buildings are mostly lit, but several towers have gone dark in the middle, like missing teeth in the skyline. People are standing outside restaurants, not eating, not leaving, just watching which lights stay on. That is what this emergency has turned everyone into, watchers of light.
The president will address the nation within the hour. That has just been confirmed. We do not yet know whether a national emergency declaration will be part of that address. We do know that federal agencies are already operating at emergency posture. The address is expected to focus on public safety, infrastructure response, and coordination with Canada and Mexico. We will carry the substance of it when available, though we may summarize rather than air extended remarks depending on access and clarity. Before that address, we expect additional state briefings. New York will speak again. Ohio will speak. Illinois may speak after controlled reductions expand. Canadian officials are expected to update their public guidance. This is moving quickly now, but I want to point out something. The speed of official response has increased, while the speed of restoration has decreased. That is the contradiction defining this phase. Governments are moving faster. The grid is being brought back slower. That is not failure by itself. It may be discipline, But to people in the dark, it feels like abandonment unless it is communicated well. So far, communication has been uneven. Some local officials are doing excellent work with limited tools. Others are waiting for state or federal language. Utility companies are cautious because they do not want to say something that later proves wrong. Federal agencies are cautious because they do not want to create panic. But caution can leave empty space, and empty space fills with rumors. The most dangerous rumor right now is that officials are hiding proof of an attack or presence inside the electrical system. We have no confirmation of that. Another dangerous rumor is that people should disconnect all electrical equipment immediately, including medical devices. That is not official guidance and could harm people. A third is that areas with power are somehow unsafe simply because they have power. That is also not supported. The risk appears tied to unstable affected systems and restoration behavior, not every powered location. Be careful with fear that gives simple instructions. Real emergencies are complicated.
There is also a rumor that every screen showing the message is dangerous to look at, or that phones displaying it should be destroyed. There is no evidence of that. Do not break devices you may need for emergency communication. If a device behaves strangely, unplug it if it is safe, step away if you are concerned, and report it through local channels when possible, but do not injure yourself trying to remove batteries or smash electronics in the dark. People are frightened because the messages feel personal. A screen in your home is not like a distant press conference. When it turns on in the dark and tells you something, even a simple sentence feels aimed at you. That is why this has spread so fast emotionally. It appears in places people thought were private.
We have a new report from an emergency operations center in Ohio. During a generator test at a county facility, the generator started normally, carried the building for approximately 3 minutes, and then disconnected from the load. The generator continued running, but the building went dark. Staff found that automatic transfer equipment had opened despite manual override. A display panel inside the electrical room showed the message, "Service is being denied," for several seconds before going blank. That is according to a county official speaking to a regional station. We are working to confirm it through state emergency management. If accurate, this may be one of the more concerning reports because it involves generator power inside a facility that should have been isolated from the grid. Again, isolated does not mean simple. Buildings have complex electrical systems, transfer switches, controls, monitoring equipment, network connections, battery backups. There may be pathways for cyber or electrical effects that are not obvious to the public, but it reinforces the concern that backup power systems are not universally immune. The Department of Energy is now advising critical facilities to verify not only fuel and generator function, but transfer equipment behavior under load. That is very specific. Hospitals, emergency operations centers, water plants, shelters, and communication sites will be checking whether generators can actually carry the building, not just start. Starting is not enough tonight. The power has to hold.
A shelter in Ohio had to move people from one gym to another after their generator failed under load. It did not explode. It did not smoke. It just stopped feeding the building. Volunteers moved everyone by flashlight. Some people thought they were being evacuated because something worse was coming, but really the staff were trying to get them closer to a part of the school that still had battery lighting. One volunteer said the hardest part was keeping people calm without lying to them. She could not say everything was fine. It was not she could not say power would come back soon. She did not know. So she said, "We are moving together." That was the instruction, not where the grid stood, not what caused the outage, just the next human action. We are moving together.
That may be the best sentence of the night. We are moving together. We are going to continue following the federal address, the controlled reductions in Chicago, the expansion in Canada, and the ongoing investigation into unauthorized messages and light patterns. For listeners joining us now, this remains a developing emergency. The blackout has not consumed the entire continent, but the response is continental. Major affected areas remain dark. Restoration is being deliberately slowed. Power anomalies have been acknowledged. The official cause is unknown. We will stay with the facts as they become available, and we will continue. We're continuing our coverage of the North American blackout. I'm John Vale with Mara Ellison. The president is expected to address the nation shortly. Before that happens, let's bring the picture current, because the shape of this emergency has changed again. The blackout remains severe across much of the Northeast. New York City, northern New Jersey, eastern Pennsylvania, Parts of Connecticut, Rhode Island, and Massachusetts are still dealing with widespread outages. Cleveland and sections of northern Ohio remain under emergency conditions. Southern Ontario is partially affected, with Toronto experiencing district-level outages and repeated instability. Chicago has begun limited controlled reductions. That means parts of the city are losing power, not because the system has failed there in the same way, but because officials are trying to prevent a wider uncontrolled failure. The phrase being used now by federal and regional grid authorities is defensive isolation. It is not a phrase most people ever expect to hear about their power system. It means operators are deliberately separating portions of the grid, holding some sections dark, keeping some sections alive only on local generation, and preventing automatic reconnection. In normal circumstances, the goal after a blackout is to reconnect. Tonight, the goal is to keep the wrong things from reconnecting too soon. That strategy appears to be slowing the spread. I want to say that carefully. It does not mean the emergency is over. It does not mean power is coming back everywhere soon. It does not mean officials understand the cause. But several grid operators are reporting that regions placed under defensive isolation are not showing the same rapid propagation that occurred earlier during restoration attempts. That is the first practical sign tonight that something authorities are doing may be working. It is not a cure. It is containment. The cost of that containment is darkness. There are people tonight who might be able to receive power sooner if this were a normal outage. They are not receiving it because officials believe an unsafe restoration could restart the disturbance or carry it into connected areas. That is a hard decision, and it will be criticized, especially by people sitting in homes, shelters, hospitals, and stalled cities. But this is where the response has landed after hours of failed reconnection, unauthorized messages, abnormal device activation, and pattern light returns. The federal government has now acknowledged 4 categories of anomalous behavior under investigation: unauthorized display messages, abnormal meter activity, device activation outside expected power paths, and patterned lighting events. Those are official categories. They are not explanations. They are buckets for evidence. Investigators are trying to determine whether these phenomena share a cause or only appear connected because they are happening during the same infrastructure collapse. The messages remain the most visible part. The first confirmed phrase was, "Do not restore service." The second was, "Service is being denied." We have received unverified reports of other wording, but authorities have not confirmed those, and we are not going to read them until they are verified. At least 2 agencies have asked media outlets to avoid amplifying unconfirmed screen text because the public may mistake it for guidance. That request is reasonable. We also have a responsibility to tell you when authorities confirm that these messages exist. So here is the clearest version. The messages are real. Their source is unknown. They are not official instructions. Do not treat them as emergency guidance. Do not attempt to respond to them. Do not damage devices you may need. If a device displays an unauthorized message, move away if necessary, unplug it if it is safe, and report it through local channels when possible. Now, on the human side, emergency response has shifted from immediate rescue to overnight endurance. The first hours were about trapped passengers, elevator rescues, traffic control, hospital stabilization, and field assessments. Those are still happening. But now cities are also thinking about the next 6 hours, the next 12, the morning after, fuel deliveries, shelter capacity, water pressure, nursing home checks, dialysis schedules, medication refrigeration, food storage, cell tower failure, public order, communication when phones stop working. The question is no longer only how do we get the lights back on, it is how do we keep people alive, informed, and calm while the lights stay off longer than anyone wanted. We have a statement from the Department of Energy. I'll paraphrase it. Officials say the defensive isolation strategy has reduced unexplained propagation in several monitored regions. Utilities are beginning limited black start preparations in selected areas. That means they may attempt to restart local power from isolated generating sources rather than reconnect affected areas to the wider grid. Critical facilities remain the priority. Hospitals, emergency operations centers, water systems, communication sites, and shelters will receive power first, where safe restoration is possible. This is going to be slow. It may happen neighborhood by neighborhood, facility by facility, circuit by circuit. Some areas may see power return and then lose it again. Some may remain dark while nearby areas come back. Officials are asking the public not to interpret staggered restoration as favoritism or abandonment. It is, according to the statement, a safety requirement. We are waiting now for the president's address. When it begins, we will summarize the key points rather than carry the full audio, unless there is a direct public safety instruction that needs to be relayed word for word.
John, the shelters are adjusting to that reality. Earlier tonight, people arrived expecting to wait a little while and go home. Now they are settling in. That changes the sound of a place. At first, there is urgency. Questions at the door, names being written down, people asking where to charge a device, where to find water, whether a relative has arrived. Later, it becomes quieter. Not peaceful, but quieter. People realize no one has an answer fast enough to keep asking every 5 minutes. At a gym in New Jersey, volunteers have divided the floor into sections using tape from the athletic department. Families on one side, medical needs near the generator outlets, elderly residents closer to the doors so responders can reach them quickly. The lights are dim because they are conserving power. A teacher who lives nearby brought boxes of crayons from her classroom, and children are drawing on scrap paper under emergency lamps. One of the drawings, according to a reporter there, shows a city skyline with only one building lit. The child drew arrows pointing away from it. In Cleveland, the shelter that moved after its generator failure has stabilized in another building. People are sleeping on wrestling mats and folded coats. A local station is broadcasting from a table near the entrance, reading updates from printed sheets. Every time the anchor says power restoration is being delayed for safety, some people groan, not because they do not understand, because understanding does not make a dark night shorter. In Toronto, residents in partially powered neighborhoods are being asked to open lobbies for people from dark buildings nearby, especially if they need warmth, charging, or elevator access. There are reports of apartment managers arguing with officials about liability while residents wait outside. There are also reports of buildings simply opening their doors and figuring out paperwork later. Both things are happening at the same time. And in New York, where the blackout has lasted long enough for people to move past disbelief, you are seeing that strange second phase of an emergency. People start organizing without being told. Someone sits at the bottom of a stairwell with a flashlight. Someone writes apartment numbers of elderly residents on cardboard. Someone goes door to door asking who has insulin, who has oxygen, who has a baby, who has no one. None of that solves the grid, but it keeps the night from becoming empty.
The President's address is beginning now. We are monitoring it. The opening message is that the federal government is coordinating with state, local, Canadian, and Mexican authorities. The public is being asked to remain calm, follow local emergency instructions, avoid unnecessary travel, and conserve communications. The President is confirming that there is no evidence at this time of an ongoing conventional military attack against North America. Cyber investigations continue. Infrastructure teams continue. The cause remains under investigation. The President is also confirming that a federal emergency declaration has been issued for the most severely affected states, with additional support available to governors as conditions change. That unlocks federal resources, logistics support, emergency funding, transportation assistance, and coordination for fuel, medical supplies, shelter operations, and infrastructure response. Now the address is turning to restoration. The President is saying in plain language that power will not be restored everywhere at once because officials have determined that some reconnection attempts created additional risk. The phrase used is, "We will bring the system back safely, not blindly." That is probably the clearest public explanation so far. There is a direct instruction now: if power returns in your area, do not use elevators until local authorities or building management confirm they are safe. Avoid plugging in non-essential devices immediately. Leave major appliances off where possible. Report smoke, sparks, burning smells, or electrical hazards. Continue conserving phone batteries. Check on neighbors if safe. Use generators only outdoors. No new explanation of the messages. The President is acknowledging that unauthorized messages appeared on some devices, that they are not official instructions, and that federal investigators are working to determine how they appeared. The public is being told not to interact with unauthorized prompts or messages. Again, that does not mean something is communicating. It means do not respond to suspicious systems, do not enter information, do not follow instructions that are not from official channels. The address is emphasizing unity and patience now. We do not need to repeat the ceremonial language. The practical points are what matter. Federal emergency declaration. No confirmed military attack. Cause unknown. Restoration will be slow and controlled. Unauthorized messages are real but not official. Public safety guidance remains in place. That is the substance. The address has ended. And now, almost immediately after that, we are receiving a grid update. Several isolated restoration tests have begun in parts of upstate New York and western Massachusetts. These are small, controlled, local restorations using separated generation sources. Officials are not reconnecting broad regions. They are attempting to energize critical facilities and limited nearby circuits while monitoring for abnormal behavior. The early reports are mixed but not disastrous. One medical facility regained stable internal power for 8 minutes and counting. A water pumping station in Massachusetts is reportedly back online under local isolation. A small section of roadway lighting near Albany came on normally and has remained stable so far. That is the first real good news we have had in a while. Again, it is limited. It does not mean the grid is fixed, but it suggests power can return safely under the right conditions. We also have one failed test in eastern Pennsylvania. A local restoration attempt was stopped after abnormal meter readings appeared outside the test zone. No injuries reported. No fire reported. Operators shut it down quickly. That is exactly why they are moving slowly. The word tonight is control. Power is not merely being restored. It is being negotiated through procedures, isolation, testing, observation, and shutdown if anything behaves incorrectly.
The president's address seems to have helped in some shelters, at least from what we're hearing, not because it answered the biggest question, but because it confirmed what people were already sensing. Officials are not just failing to turn the lights back on, they are choosing not to do it quickly because quick may be dangerous. That distinction matters. In a shelter in Pennsylvania, people listened on a battery radio held up near the center of the room. A reporter there said the room was quiet during the part about unauthorized messages. People looked at their phones, even dead ones, like they were waiting for them to respond. After the address, a volunteer wrote 3 sentences on a whiteboard. Power restoration will be slow. Screen messages are not official. Stay off elevators. That is what people need right now. Sentences that can survive a dead battery. In New York, some people are reacting with anger. They want timelines. They want to know why one hospital can have power and a nursing home 2 blocks away cannot. They want to know whether the warning on the screen was from a hacker, from the government, from the grid, from something else. The answer they are getting is still investigation. That is not satisfying. It may be honest, but it does not give people a place to put fear. In Toronto, officials have repeated the same core guidance, and Canadian media are now using language very similar to U.S. briefings: controlled restoration, unauthorized display activity, defensive isolation. People are learning a new vocabulary in real time because the old one, blackout, is no longer enough.
We have a significant technical update. The defensive isolation strategy appears to have stopped the westward spread in several monitored corridors. That comes from a federal grid coordination source and is now being echoed by state officials in Illinois and Ohio. Chicago's controlled reductions remain in place, but no uncontrolled citywide failure has occurred. St. Louis has not gone dark. Washington remains powered. Southern grid operators are reporting stress, but not major failure. That may be the turning point of the night, if it holds. The event is still active in affected regions. Millions remain without power. Restoration is uncertain. The anomalies are not explained. But the spread appears to have slowed after operators cut connections and disabled automatic reconnection. If that holds for another hour, officials may begin describing the emergency as contained, not resolved. Contained is not comfort. Contained means the fire break may be working while the fire still burns on one side. We are also learning more about the messages. Investigators are focusing on several possible transmission paths, including emergency alert infrastructure, device firmware, smart meter networks, building automation systems, and corrupted restoration signals. That last phrase is unusual. Corrupted restoration signals. We are trying to understand exactly what that means. It may refer to control commands being altered or misread during attempts to re-energize equipment. It may not refer to public-facing messages at all, but one official familiar with the investigation told an affiliate station that the messages do not appear to have originated from a standard government alert template. They lack headers, authentication markers, routing signatures, and formatting typical of emergency alerts. They are plain text, stripped of source identity, appearing where text should not appear. That does not tell us who sent them. It tells us who probably did not. A second official cautions that during infrastructure failure, logs can be incomplete or misleading. Investigators may not yet know what they are looking at. That caution is fair. Now there is another development from upstate New York. During one of the isolated restoration tests, a small hospital regained stable power. No unauthorized message appeared. No abnormal activation outside the test circuit was detected. After 10 minutes, operators expanded restoration to an adjacent emergency services building. That also held. They did not expand further. They stopped there intentionally and monitored. That restraint is important. Earlier tonight, restoration attempts may have failed because operators tried to bring back too much too quickly, or because the disturbance exploited reconnection paths. Now they are building tiny islands and refusing to connect them until they remain stable. This may be the recovery model for the rest of the night. Small islands of light, long stretches of darkness between them.
That image is already visible from the air. Some news helicopters are grounded or limited, but a few cameras from aircraft and tall buildings are showing cities no longer simply dark or lit. They look broken into pieces. A hospital here, a fire station there, a block near a shelter, a bridge with emergency lights. Then miles of black streets, and beyond that another small island. In normal life, city lights blur together. You do not think about which building has its own generator, which tower depends on which substation, which tunnel has emergency batteries, which school can become a shelter. Tonight, every piece is separate. Every light has a reason. In one shot from outside Boston, you can see a hospital glowing softly while the surrounding neighborhood is dark. Ambulances move in and out under a canopy of white light. A few blocks away, people are standing on sidewalks looking toward it. Not going there, not crowding it, just looking. The hospital becomes proof that the world has not gone completely out. In Cleveland, a fire station lit by generator has become a landmark. People are walking toward it because they can see it from several streets away. Officials are asking people not to crowd emergency stations unless they need help, but you can understand the instinct. In a dark city, light feels like authority, safety, answer. The hard part tonight is that some lights are safe and some lights are not understood yet.
We have an update from Pennsylvania regarding the earlier failed restoration test. Officials say abnormal meter activity appeared west of the isolated test zone, but no physical light pattern was observed this time. The test was stopped within seconds. Field crews confirmed no obvious equipment damage. That is encouraging in a limited way. It suggests operators can detect some abnormal behavior quickly and shut down before it spreads. The same update says crews are physically verifying isolation points before any additional tests. That means people are going out into dark substations, switching yards, service corridors, and control rooms to confirm the grid is separated where the map says it is separated. This is dangerous work. Even in normal conditions, electrical restoration is hazardous. Tonight, with unreliable status data and abnormal behavior, it is even more so. Utility workers are part of the emergency response. We talk often about police, fire, EMS, hospitals, and government officials. But tonight, line crews, substation technicians, grid operators, plant engineers, relay specialists, communications technicians, and control room staff are making decisions that affect millions of people. Some are standing in dark facilities with handheld meters because software cannot be trusted. Some are refusing to close circuits even under pressure because the readings do not feel right. Some are telling cities they have to wait. Those are not popular decisions. They may be the reason the blackout does not become worse. We are receiving early reports that parts of northern New Jersey may begin isolated restoration tests within the hour. Not broad restoration, tests. Critical services first. Hospitals, water, emergency operations, communications. Residential areas may remain dark longer. New York City is not yet announcing broad restoration. Officials there say the system is too complex to rush and that building-level safety remains a major concern. In Chicago, controlled reductions have stabilized. The city is not expanding them at this moment. That is good. If Chicago holds, the worst westward fear of the last hour may not materialize. Illinois officials are still asking residents to conserve power and avoid unnecessary travel. In Toronto, the situation remains unstable. Canadian operators are adopting segmentation measures similar to the U.S. strategy. Some neighborhoods may be intentionally kept offline. Emergency shelters are expanding. Northern Mexico is still reporting irregularities, but no large blackout. Authorities there say they are maintaining separation from unstable cross-border influences where appropriate. Again, that is technical and does not indicate a full failure. The North American response is now essentially unified around one principle: do not feed the disturbance. That phrase has not been used officially, but it is the operational idea. Do not feed it with broad reconnection. Do not let automatic systems reclose. Do not assume a dark line is safe or a lit device is normal. Build islands. Test slowly. Expand only when stable. We have still not named what it is.
People are naming it anyway. That is what people do when official language stays abstract. Online, when people can get online, they are calling it the denial, the dark spread, the thing in the wires, the second current. None of those are official. Some are theatrical. Some are dangerous because they make the event sound more knowable than it is. But names come from fear. They are an attempt to hold something still. In shelters and dark apartments, most people are not using those names. They are using smaller words: the lights, the phones, the elevator, the hospital, the bridge, the message. They are talking about whether grandma got downstairs, whether the baby formula is still cold, whether the car has enough gas, whether the stairwell is safe, whether the neighbor in 12B answered the door. That is the level where this emergency is being lived, not as a continental grid anomaly, as a hallway, a battery, a locked pharmacy, a dead traffic light, a screen that turned on when it should not have. There is a woman in Queens who told a reporter she did not care what caused it until morning. Tonight she just wanted someone to knock on every door in her building. That is a fair thing to want.
We have another update from the Federal Coordination Center. The spread remains slowed. Defensive isolation is holding in several major corridors. Officials are not yet using the phrase contained publicly, but one state emergency official has said conditions are stabilizing at the perimeter. That means the edges of the event are becoming less active. Inside the affected zones, the situation remains difficult. New outages can still occur. Restoration tests can still fail. Unauthorized messages could still appear. But the fear that the blackout would continue sweeping west across the continent appears to be easing, at least for now. Now we need to talk about the ending of this night, because there may not be a dramatic one. There may not be one moment when all the lights come back and everyone cheers. In fact, officials are warning against expecting that. Recovery may be uneven through the morning and into the next day or longer. Some neighborhoods may remain without power after critical facilities nearby are restored. Some buildings may need inspections before they can safely reconnect. Some equipment may have to be replaced. Some data from grid systems may be too corrupted to rely on. Investigators may take months to reconstruct the first minutes of the event. There will be political questions. Why did restoration attempts continue after the first anomalies? Did utilities share information quickly enough? Did federal agencies respond fast enough? Were grid protections adequate? Did smart systems create hidden vulnerabilities? Did emergency alert pathways fail? Were the messages part of an attack, an artifact, a malfunction, or something no one has language for yet? Those questions are coming. They are not tonight's first priority. Tonight's first priority is people in the dark. We are now seeing the first stable restoration island in New York hold beyond 20 minutes. That includes a hospital, an emergency services facility, and several blocks of critical infrastructure support. Operators are not expanding it yet. No unauthorized message has been reported there. No patterned light behavior. No abnormal meter migration. That is cautiously positive. A second restoration island in Massachusetts has held beyond 15 minutes. Water pressure support has improved in one municipality. Emergency managers are preparing to move some medically vulnerable residents there if needed. A third test in Pennsylvania was aborted. That is not failure of the overall strategy. It is the strategy working as designed. Test, detect, stop. New Jersey tests have not yet begun publicly. Toronto is preparing similar tests but has not announced results. Chicago remains stable under controlled reduction. This is what containment looks like. Uneven, technical, unsatisfying, but real.
The first people who get stable power back are not reacting the way people might imagine. Some are not cheering. They are waiting. They are looking at lights like they might go away if watched too directly. In the hospital in upstate New York, staff reportedly waited a full minute before moving certain systems back from battery support. A nurse told a local reporter, "Nobody trusted the first light." That may be the sentence for the whole night. Nobody trusted the first light. At the Massachusetts water station, workers stood beside equipment as it came back online, listening for anything wrong, not looking at a screen first, listening. The sound of pumps starting normally was enough to make one of them cry, according to a local official. Not because everything was fixed, but because one machine did what it was supposed to do. In a shelter nearby, someone announced that water pressure was improving, and people clapped. Not loudly, just a tired, careful clap. The kind people give when they are grateful, but do not want to tempt the room.
That is where we are. We now have a new statement from Homeland Security. Investigators have not identified the source of the unauthorized messages. They are asking anyone with original images or video to preserve files and metadata if possible. Do not edit images before submitting them. Do not delete device logs if you are a facility operator. Do not attempt to recreate the message. Do not connect unknown devices to critical systems to test whether the message appears. Again, that is for operators and investigators more than ordinary residents, but it tells us how seriously the message evidence is being treated. The FBI is involved. Federal cyber agencies are involved. Energy investigators are involved. Canadian counterparts are involved. This will become one of the largest infrastructure investigations in modern North American history, assuming tonight continues moving toward containment. We should also say this. There will be misinformation after this. There will be people claiming they knew the cause before investigators did. There will be fake screenshots, fake leaked documents, fake maps, fake whistleblowers, fake explanations wrapped around real fear. Some of them will be harmless attention-seeking. Some may be designed to create panic or profit. The best defense is patience. Real investigations are slower than rumors because real investigations have to survive contact with evidence. The evidence tonight is strange enough. It does not need decoration. We have a report from New York City. Some emergency lighting has been restored in several subway stations, but passenger service remains suspended in affected lines. Transit officials are not restarting trains until power stability and track safety are confirmed. People should not enter tunnels or stations unless directed. Earlier evacuations are complete in most known stalled trains, though crews are still checking certain sections. New York hospitals remain under emergency protocols. Some have stable generator power. Others are receiving fuel. A small number of non-critical patients are being transferred away from facilities with unstable backup systems. The city is asking residents not to call hospitals for general blackout information. Use emergency lines only for emergencies. New Jersey has begun its first isolated restoration test. We do not have results yet. Pennsylvania is expanding shelter capacity. Ohio reports that Cleveland's outage remains severe but stable. That word stable in this context means not rapidly worsening. Ontario officials say Toronto's system remains fragile. Controlled isolation continues. Chicago officials say no further reductions are planned in the next half hour if conditions hold. That is the best regional picture we have.
We are hearing more from people whose areas were not hit directly but changed anyway. In neighborhoods with power outside the main blackout, people turned off lights voluntarily after officials asked them to conserve. Whole streets that could have stayed bright dimmed themselves. Some people said it felt symbolic. Others said it felt practical. Maybe it was both. A family in Buffalo taped a sign to their front window saying they had power for medical charging if anyone nearby needed it. A church outside Chicago opened its basement before losing power, just in case. A grocery store in western Pennsylvania handed out ice to people with medication before its own freezers became a concern. A radio station in Ohio has been reading messages from listeners who cannot reach relatives, not dramatic messages, just names and locations and "I'm safe." That is one of the things radio becomes during a blackout, not just news. A wall where people can leave proof of themselves.
Yes, and for anyone listening who is waiting for someone, we know that may be the hardest part. In a blackout this wide, silence does not always mean danger. It may mean a dead phone, an overloaded tower, a closed road, a shelter registration line, a person conserving battery, a message that failed to send. Emergency officials are asking people to use text when possible rather than repeated calls. Keep messages short, where you are, whether you are safe, what you need, where you plan to stay. We now have results from the first New Jersey isolated restoration test. It was partially successful. A municipal emergency operations center regained power and held it. A nearby communications relay came online for several minutes, then was manually disconnected after abnormal readings appeared in a connected equipment rack. No unauthorized message was reported. No light pattern was observed. Operators are calling the test useful but not clean. That is probably going to be the pattern. Useful but not clean. A second test is being delayed while crews verify physical isolation. Federal officials are now preparing a morning operational plan. That suggests they expect the emergency to last into daylight. The plan reportedly prioritizes hospitals, water systems, emergency communications, shelters, and then phased residential restoration where grid islands prove stable. We should prepare listeners for that. If you are in an affected area, you may wake up without power, or you may not sleep. If you are in a shelter, expect instructions to change through the night. If you are at home and safe, remain there unless told otherwise. If power returns, act cautiously. Do not run every appliance at once. Do not use elevators until cleared. Keep a flashlight available even after lights come back. If something smells hot or electrical, turn off what you safely can and report it. The return may be uneven. The return may be temporary. The return may be frightening before it becomes normal again.
Dawn is still a few hours away for much of the affected region, but people are already talking about it. That happens in long emergencies. You start measuring time by the next visible thing. Not clock time, the next thing the body understands. Morning, light from the sky that does not depend on a grid. People want to see their streets again. They want to look out a window and recognize the shape of the world without waiting for a circuit to decide whether it will hold. In New York, people on one dark block reportedly began cheering when the sky lightened just a little behind the buildings, even though the power was still out. It was not sunrise yet, just the first pale edge, but it meant the night was losing one advantage. That may sound small, but after hours of wondering whether light itself is safe, daylight becomes different. It does not ask permission from the grid. It does not arrive through a wire. It cannot display a message.
We have another stabilization update. The perimeter remains mostly stable. Chicago is holding, St. Louis is holding, Washington is holding, the Southeast is holding, northern Mexico has not developed a major outage. The main affected zones remain the Northeast, northern Ohio, southern Ontario, and parts of eastern Canada. That is still enormous. But it is not the whole continent going dark. Officials are preparing to use the word contained if current conditions continue. We are not there yet, but we are closer than we were an hour ago. Inside the affected zones, restoration islands are increasing slowly. 2 stable in New York, 1 stable in Massachusetts, 1 partial in New Jersey. Ohio preparing tests. Toronto preparing tests. Pennsylvania cautious after aborted attempts. Critical facilities remain the focus. The unauthorized messages have not appeared in the most recent successful restoration islands. That may be important. It may mean defensive isolation prevents whatever pathway allowed the messages. It may mean the messages were tied to earlier unstable reconnection attempts. It may mean nothing yet. Investigators will need more data. The patterned light reports have also decreased since broad restoration was paused and automatic reconnection disabled. Again, that suggests a relationship. It does not explain the relationship. What we can say is this: the strategy of slowing down, cutting apart, and restoring in isolated islands appears to be reducing the most dangerous behavior. It is possible that by morning, authorities will say the emergency has been contained. It is not possible tonight to say it has been solved. There is a difference.
And people will feel that difference. Contained means the danger stops spreading. It does not mean the food in the refrigerator is safe. It does not mean the elevator works. It does not mean the hospital schedule returns to normal. It does not mean the child in the shelter forgets the lights on the wall. It does not mean the nurse stops hearing the generator after she goes home. It does not mean the person who saw that message on their television will ever look at a blank screen the same way. But contained does mean there is an edge. It means the night did not keep growing forever. It means responders can work inward instead of chasing something outward. It means the map may start making sense again, one island at a time.
We are now nearly 9 hours into this emergency, and for the first time tonight, officials are using language that suggests the immediate spread has been stopped. The restricted grid conditions remain in place. Millions are still without power. Emergency crews are still working. Hospitals are still under strain. Families are still separated. Investigators still do not know what caused the messages, the abnormal activation, or the patterned light events. But the larger danger, the possibility that the disturbance would continue moving west and south through interconnected systems, appears to have been slowed by defensive isolation. That does not make the morning simple. There will be investigations into every decision made tonight. There will be hearings. There will be technical reports that take months to write and years to fully understand. There will be people who believe the official explanation, people who reject it, and people who never receive one that feels large enough for what they saw. For now, the practical reality is this. The grid is not coming back as one grid. It is coming back as islands. Hospitals first, water systems, emergency communications, shelters, then neighborhoods, cautiously, with crews watching for signs that the wrong behavior has returned. Some areas will wait longer than others. Some will lose power again after getting it back. Some will hear generators through the morning. Some will wake up to lights and not trust them. If you are in an affected area, keep following local instructions. Do not assume the end of the spread means the end of the danger. Electrical hazards remain. Traffic systems remain unreliable. Communications remain strained. Use caution with food, water, elevators, appliances, generators, and travel. Check on people near you. If power returns, let it return gently. Do not make the system carry more than it has to right away. We have one last update from the Federal Coordination Center before we close this hour of coverage. The event is being described as contained at the western perimeter. Restoration operations will continue through the night under isolated protocols. The cause remains undetermined. Unauthorized messages remain under investigation. No further confirmed message displays have occurred in the last 40 minutes in the monitored restoration islands. That last part is important. Maybe isolation is working. Maybe the thing we are calling a disturbance cannot cross gaps that are truly opened. Maybe the messages were a symptom of a system trying to reconnect through pathways it should not have used. Maybe this is all a rare, cascading failure of technology, layered so deeply that it looked like intention from the outside. Maybe. Morning will not answer that by itself.
But morning is coming now. You can see it on the cameras that still work. Not bright, not comforting exactly, but real. The skylines are still broken. Some towers are dark from top to bottom. Some hospitals glow alone. Some streets are marked by flares instead of traffic lights. Smoke is rising from small fires that crews are still putting out. Bridges are lined with vehicles that have not moved in hours. Shelters are full of people trying to sleep under lights that hum too loudly when they work and disappear too quickly when they do not. And still, morning is coming. In one city, the power came back to a hospital and stayed. In another, a water pump started and sounded normal. In another, a fire station kept its doors open all night. In another, a neighbor sat in a stairwell with a flashlight so strangers could find the steps. The whole continent did not go dark. The dark did not keep moving forever. The first light from the sky does not belong to the grid, and no screen can turn it off. There will be fear after this. There will be questions. There will be people who swear the lights moved with purpose, people who say the message appeared on a device that had no power, people who watched a city come alive in strips and then disappear again. Those stories will not fit easily into briefings. Maybe some will turn out to be mistakes, maybe some will not. But right now, people are still being moved to safety. Crews are still building islands of power. The edge is holding. The morning is arriving anyway. And after a night like this, that may be the first kind of relief anyone can trust.
You've been listening to continuing coverage of the North American blackout. I'm John Vale with Mara Ellison. Stay safe and good morning to all.